The radio crackled to life just as I was rolling past the old rest stop. Fog hugged the asphalt like a living thing, thick enough that the headlights barely cut through it. I could feel it pressing against the car, cold and damp, and it made the hairs along my neck stand on end. I hated this stretch of highway at night. Too quiet, too empty, too easy for things to hide. Unit 7, we've got a missing trucker report. Last seen near mile marker 42. Proceed with caution. The dispatcher's voice said flat and routine, but I swear I felt a shiver run through it. There's always something in the pauses, in the way they say caution. Like they know something I don't. I flipped the siren switch, just to soften to warn, not scare. Fog muffled everything beyond 10 feet. The radio crackled again. Reports say he hasn't checked in for over 2 hours. His last call was unusual. There it was, the word, unusual. I didn't like it. The highway stretched on, empty and glistening with wet asphalt. Rain had stopped, but the air still held that sharp, cold bite. I slowed the car to a crawl, eyes scanning the fog, catching nothing, yet sensing everything. Something about the mist felt wrong, heavy, almost weighting. I reached mile marker 42. Nothing, just a faint outline of the guardrail, slick with rain, and the woods beyond, dark and silent. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching on wet gravel. My flashlight cut through the fog, revealing the faintest shimmer on the asphalt. Tire tracks. They were fresh, leading off the road into the woods. I felt a tightening in my chest. Why would a truck leave the road here? And why no signs of struggle? No debris, no skid marks, just tracks that disappeared into the shadows. My hands itched toward my radio, but I hesitated. Something about this place made even speaking feel wrong. I followed the tracks a few yards in. The fog swallowed the light almost instantly. Every step sounded louder than it should. Then I heard it, a faint thump like a heavy boot hitting the soft earth. I froze. Hello? My voice was small, swallowed by the mist. Nothing answered, just the trees standing still, too quiet. The tracks turned again, deeper into the forest. My instinct screamed to leave, but something, curiosity, stupidity, duty, pulled me forward. The fog shifted. I could swear I saw a figure, pale, standing between the trees. Just for a second, a flash, gone before I could focus. My heart thumped, but my training told me to stay calm. Keep your cool. Look for logical explanations. But the logic didn't make the hairs on my arms lie down. I pulled out my radio. Unit 7, I'm at the last known location. Tracks lead into the woods. No sign of the truck. My voice sounded hollow. No response. The line was static. The fog seemed to absorb the sound, the forest swallowing my words before they could reach the dispatcher. I took another step. The air smelled different here. Not just wet earth or rotting leaves. Something else, metallic, sharp, the kind of smell that clings to your lungs and makes you swallow hard. Try not to panic. I stepped closer to where the tracks had vanished, and that's when I noticed a tire mark. Not just in the dirt, but pressed into the grass, deeper, as if something heavy had forced its way through, but wrong, distorted, almost stretched, like the earth itself had resisted. I crouched, shining the flashlight closer, and that's when I saw it. A piece of cloth, torn, not dirty, not ordinary. Something about it shimmered oddly in the light. I recognized the pattern instantly. Safety vest, neon orange, the kind truckers wear. But it looked wrong. Damp, yes, but almost too clean in certain parts, as if the fog itself had washed it. My stomach twisted. Footsteps. Behind me. I spun, flashlight swinging. Nothing. Just fog, thick and impenetrable. My pulse raced. I wanted to call it in, wanted to retreat, but my feet didn't move. They never do when something grips you like this. Something alive, watching. I reached for the tracks again, trying to find where they led. But the path had changed. Not visibly, but in perception. The trees seemed closer, too close, leaning in like they were listening. I blinked, took a step back. The fog shifted again. And then I heard it, breathing. Not mine. Heavy, wet, deliberate. Coming from the woods, not far, yet impossible to locate. I force myself to speak into the radio again. Dispatch. I stop. A low thump echoed behind me. Then another, slow, methodical, something large, or several somethings. Something moving with intent. The kind of intent that makes you want to run before thinking. I turned toward my car, heart hammering. The fog thickened instantly, like someone had thrown a curtain across the road. I could barely see the guardrail. The asphalt disappeared beneath a haze that made everything beyond a few feet feel unreal. My car's lights barely penetrated it. The breathing grew louder. The thumps matched a slow rhythm, almost walking in tandem with me. I fumbled for my keys, but they slipped from my fingers, hard on my throat. I bent down. Keys. Picked them up. And that's when I noticed the tire tracks again. They were back on the road. Fresh, perfectly straight, leading toward the next bend. Impossible. I hadn't moved the truck. I hadn't moved anything. And yet, the tracks were there. I climbed into the car, doors locking behind me. Engine roared to life, slicing to the fog with harsh white light. I drove slowly, eyes darting to the woods on both sides. Shadows shifted just at the edge of vision. Something followed. I knew it. My rational mind screamed it couldn't be. Yet the feeling persisted. I radioed again. Unit 7 moving toward next marker. Tracks, they keep appearing. Static swallowed the rest. Then a voice. Low, distorted. Familiar? Maybe. Don't look back. Just a whisper, carried by the radio static. Though no one else was transmitting. My hand froze on the wheel. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Fog, yes, but no shape. Nothing. Yet the feeling of being watched didn't leave. Every blink made the headlights look different, brighter, revealing things I couldn't name. Shapes in the trees fleeting like shadows stretched too long. I took a deep breath. Tried to focus. Logic. Rational. It's the night. Fog. Stress. Adrenaline. I'm an officer. I've seen accidents, robberies, worse. But something in me knew this wasn't ordinary. Not ordinary in any sense. Mile marker 43 came into view. Empty. Silent. No truck. No tracks. Just fog. And the feeling. Heavy. Watching. Waiting. I slowed, heart hammering. Try to tell myself it's just a fog, just a road, just another thump. Behind me. Not subtle. Not imagined. Heavy. Deliberate. Matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. I looked into the woods. Nothing. My rational mind screamed it was nothing. Trees. Falling branches. But instinct said otherwise. I gripped the wheel, eyes darting, fog curling along the asphalt, and then a light, not my car, not street lamps. A single, faint white glow hovering among the trees, flickering, almost like a flashlight, but moving differently, too smoothly, too fluid. And I swear for a heartbeat, it seemed to look at me. I floored the accelerator. The car surged, tires spitting wet asphalt, fog billowing behind. Yet even as I drove away, I couldn't shake it. That sense of being followed, that whisper on the radio, that fleeting glow. It stayed with me, pressed against my skull. By the time I reached the next rest stop, the fog had thinned. Normal, mundane. Yet I couldn't leave the memory behind. Something was out there, watching, waiting. And I knew this wasn't over. Not for me, not for the missing trucker, and maybe not for anyone who drove this stretch after midnight. I didn't know what I had seen, or if I had even seen it at all. But the unease settled deep in my chest, heavy and stubborn. I'd be back on this road tomorrow. Same time, same stretch. And the question that wouldn't leave me, if it was still there, would it recognize me? The headlights carved through the fog like knives, cutting short tunnels of pale light along the slick asphalt. Every puddle on the shoulder glimmered like a mirror, reflecting the highway in warped, liquid fragments. I noticed one and then another, each surface catching shapes that didn't belong. For a moment, I thought it was my reflection, but it wasn't. My movements didn't match. The rain from earlier still lingered in the air, heavy with that sharp, metallic tang. I could smell it clinging to the leather of my seat, to my jacket. The fog pressed against the car, almost leaning in, as if the world itself had become watchful. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles pale. Every instinct screamed that something was just out of view. Then I saw it, a figure, pale and indistinct, standing on the shoulder just for a heartbeat. I blinked and it was gone. Not behind a tree, not swallowed by fog. Simply gone. My pulse spiked. I looked again. Nothing. Yet the space it had occupied seemed colder, heavier, as if it had left a weight in the air. I reached for the radio, fingers fumbling. Unit 7 to dispatch. Static swallowed my words, distorted them, and for a moment, the voice on the other end sounded like it was right beside me, whispering. I froze, every nerve screaming. But no one was there. Only the endless stretch of black, wet asphalt. The puddles multiplied in my mind. Every reflection now held something extra, a flicker that didn't belong. Sometimes it was just a shadow. Sometimes the vague outline of someone standing where no one could stand. I caught glimpses at the edge of the wheel, in the corner of my eye. Each time I tried to focus, the image dissolved. I slowed the car, letting it roll along the shoulder. My headlights danced across the trees. Every trunk was a column of gray, every branch reaching into fog like bony fingers. Something moved just beyond the light. Could have been an animal, could have been a trick of shadow and wet leaves. But the rhythm felt deliberate, almost human. I tried to tell myself I was seeing things. Fog, exhaustion, the tension from last night's call. That's all it was. But my stomach nodded. That instinct you learn as a cop, the one that whispers, "This isn't normal," screamed. A reflection caught my eye in the next puddle. I jerked my head down. For a second, I saw a face pressed close to the asphalt, pale, eyes wide and unblinking. The features blurred like a smear of painted water, and then it lifted. It wasn't in the puddle anymore. It wasn't anywhere. But my chest tightened as if it had just exhaled on me. I swallowed hard. My fingers drummed on the steering wheel. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was walking along the shoulder, just beyond the fog. Not running, not hiding, just moving alongside me. Not far, close enough that if I stopped, it could reach out and touch the car. The radio flickered. Static again. Then a sound, soft, deliberate, almost like footsteps crunching on wet gravel. My head snapped to the side. Nothing. The trees remained still. Their branches weighted with mist. My pulse quickened. I'm alone. I'm alone. I kept telling myself, but the voice in my chest didn't believe it. Another reflection caught my eye. In a puddle by the guardrail, I saw it again. A figure crouched motionless, watching, not moving, not blinking, just waiting. I blinked. It vanished. My stomach twisted. What the hell was happening? I gripped the wheel tighter. The air inside the car had grown cold. Not just chilly, bone-deep, wet cold, like it seeped through clothes, skin, and bone. I tried to rationalize. Maybe the puddles were catching tree branches, clouds, distant headlights. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But the rhythm of the footfalls in the fog matched my heartbeat. I could feel in my chest, thump thump, and then another, heavier, slower, deliberate, following, always following. The shoulder widened slightly, and I saw something impossible. A shadow stretched along the foggy ground, not attached to any tree, any car, any object. It moved in my headlights, elongated and twitching. I thought about stopping, stepping out, looking closer. But the moment the thought crossed my mind, a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just fear. It was a sense that stopping, even for a second, might let it reach me. I drove on, slowly, cautiously. The fog seemed to close in tighter with every mile, wrapping around the car like a shroud. The puddles multiplied, each reflection teasing me, hinting at something just beyond understanding. I caught glimpses of movement in the water that didn't match the car, didn't match the trees. They were fast, fluid, almost intelligent. A thought hit me, unbidden. What if the trucker isn't missing? My stomach sank. Maybe he didn't leave the road. Maybe he never made it out. Maybe this presence, whatever it was all that remained. I swallowed, trying to force my voice calm as I spoke into the radio again. Dispatch, I think something's following me. shoulder, puddles. Aye. Static, nothing but static. And then a whisper, clear as day, not from the radio, not human, just a breathy, low, deliberate sound. Watch. My heart skipped. My hands shook on the wheel. I scanned the fog. Nothing. Yet I felt it close now, as if leaning over my shoulder from the back seat. A puddle flashed again. I glimpsed a figure running along the road behind me. Legs just a blur. Not a car. Not an animal. Just a shape. And in the moment I blinked, it was gone. But the sense of being followed remained, heavy and oppressive, that I reached for the dash. Try and turn up the radio. Anything to break the silence. The static hissed, then faded into a low, almost musical hum. Not music, not a song. Just hum, vibrating through the car, shivering in my bones. The puddles along the road rippled, though the wind was still, the rain long gone. I tried to focus on the road. Mile markers blurred past. Each one felt like it was stretching, time bending. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Yet every time I blinked, there was a flicker. Someone or something lurking just beyond vision, waiting, watching. The shoulder narrowed and the fog thinned slightly. Relief? Maybe. My heartbeat slowed, slightly, but then I saw it in the next puddle. A hand, pale, fingers splayed, pressed against the liquid surface, reaching, not just reflecting, but emerging. I jerked the wheel, swerved slightly. My pulse shot up again. I gripped the wheel with both hands, breathing ragged. The shoulder widened again. The puddles reflected only sky now, calm and mundane. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over. Just fog, just exhaustion, just paranoia. But the hum lingered in my ears, and the sensation of eyes crawling along my back refused to leave. Mile marker 44 approached. Still no truck. Still no logical explanation. Yet every instinct told me this wasn't over. That figure, or whatever it was still here, always here, watching, waiting. And the thought clawed at me. Maybe it had been here the whole time. Maybe it had been waiting for someone to drive past, alone. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Fog thickened again, rolling in waves. The puddles shimmered with a strange, silvery glow. I realized I couldn't trust my eyes, couldn't trust the reflections, but I could trust the feeling, the pull of the unseen. Something wanted me to see it. Something wanted me to know it was here. And I did. Static filled the car, thicker than fog ever could. My hand hovered over the radio knob, hesitant, half expecting it to leap from the dash and whisper something at me. The night outside was still, too still, but inside the car, the air thrummed with tension. Every mile marker felt heavier, like I was driving through invisible water, thick and slow. Then it came, a voice, faint and broken, cutting through the static like glass, distorted, warped, almost pleading. Here, help, not safe. My heart skipped a beat. I spun the knob, tried another frequency. Nothing. The radio hissed and popped, but the voice lingered, just below comprehension. Not loud enough to locate, not clear enough to understand fully. I gripped the wheel harder, knuckles white. Fog pressed against the windshield. Water droplets trembling on the glass like they were listening too. My eyes darted to the shoulder, expecting, hoping, praying that maybe it was just my imagination. But the cold in my chest told me it wasn't imagination. Something was out there, and it was talking. I tried to answer into the mic. Dispatch? Unit 7. My voice cracked. No response. Only static. Then the voice again. Don't follow. This time closer, urgent, almost angry. My pulse jumped. I leaned closer to the radio. Try and make sense of it. The words came in fragments, lost between white noise, like someone dragging their voice through water. I pressed my palm against the dash, feeling the vibrations hum through my arm. It was more than sound. It was presence. The radio wasn't just transmitting. It was alive. The words weren't coming from the dispatcher. They weren't coming from any human. I knew that deep down. I didn't want to, but I knew. My eyes scanned the fog again. The highway stretched endlessly, with asphalt reflecting the car lights in broken shards. I could see the puddles, each one trembling with reflections that didn't belong to me. Shapes flickered inside them. Figures crouched, half-formed, impossible. They moved only in my peripheral vision, gone when I tried to focus. And with each flicker, the voice whispered again, stitched into the static, impossibly close. I tried rationalizing. Maybe someone on another channel, messing with frequencies, a prank, or, God help me, a hallucination. But the fear settled deep where rationality couldn't reach. My chest tightened. The sound of breathing filled the car. Not mine. Heavy, wet, deliberate. Almost synchronized with the broken whispers. A new voice joined the first, layer beneath, barely audible. It was laughing, not joyfully, not clearly human, but a low, wet chuckle that made my stomach twist. I slammed my hand on the knob, turning it rapidly through every channel. Nothing. Silence. Static. Then the first voice again. Urgent. See, can't leave. I froze. My headlights caught movement on the shoulder. A shadow darting between the trees. No shape, not fully. Just darkness folding over itself, stretching longer than it should. Every instinct screamed at me to drive away, but my feet were glued to the pedals. I couldn't stop listening. Couldn't stop trying to understand. The radio shifted. The voices became clearer for a moment, almost coherent. He waits, waiting alone, my stomach sank. The word he twisted in my mind. Someone was out there. Someone, or something, watching, waiting for me, for anyone driving this road after dark. And maybe I was just the first to hear it speak. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Fog and darkness. Nothing more. Yet the feeling of eyes on me grew heavier, as if the radio itself had eyes. Shapes flickered across the windshield. Shadows darting in time with the distorted whispers. Every puddle reflected not just light, but movement. Figures emerging, then vanishing as quickly as they appeared. I tried to move faster, foot pressing harder on the accelerator. The hum of the engine mixed with the hum of the radio, creating a vibration that I could feel in my chest. The whispers grew more insistent, overlapping. Don't go back, and alone can't see. My head pounded with every syllable. I had to focus, had to keep my mind on the road, but I could not unhear them. Then a new sound joined the chorus. Static tapping, like fingers drumming on the dashboard. I jerked, heart racing. My pulse felt audible, beating against the roof of the car. I glanced at the puddle on the passenger side. Movement again. Something crouched, elongated, pressed against the wet asphalt. It flickered, disappeared, reappeared. Each time I looked, the radio whispered, almost laughing. He knows, he sees. I gripped the wheel, sweat running down my face. The words overlapped now, multiple voices, multiple sources, or maybe just one entity using the radio to mock me. I pressed my hand to my ear, trying to block it out. It was impossible. The sound filled the car, seeped into my skull, vibrating against the bones behind my eyes. Another glance at the shoulder. A figure? Or just another trick of reflection. It moved unnaturally, long limbs folding, bending in ways no human could. The fog didn't just surround it. It poured over it, clinging like wet cloth. And then it was gone. But the whispers remained, stitched into the static, impossible to ignore. I tried to call the dispatcher again, voice trembling. Unit 7, repeat, do you copy? Only static. Then the words, don't look behind. The voice carried a weight, a command. I swallowed hard, turning my eyes from the mirrors. Yet I felt the presence closer than ever, pressing against the car, pressing against my mind. The puddles reflected new shapes, not fully formed, not fully absent. Fingers, faces, eyes, moving too fast for the mind to comprehend, always just out of focus. I blinked, they vanished. The whispers twisted into something sharper. He waits for you, my pulse hammered. I realized the voices were guiding me, leading me, testing me. I didn't want to follow. I didn't want to listen. But the sound held me, gripped me, forced my gaze to the road and the shadows. A distant shape appeared between the trees. Human-like, but wrong. Too tall, too still. And for a moment, I thought I could hear it breathing in sync with the radio. Each thump of its chest, Each vibration of the static, each flood of the fog, they were all one rhythm, one entity. Watching, waiting. I forced myself to look ahead, driving through the fog, following the road, following the whispers. The static shifted again, softer now, almost like a lullaby. Soon, soon you'll see. The words carried promise and threat entwined. I didn't understand, but a part of me wanted to know. Mile marker 45. Empty, silent, yet the feeling of being watched didn't leave. Shapes danced in the puddles. Shadows twisted in the fog. The whispers layered over one another, speaking in voices I couldn't place. Familiar, unfamiliar, human, not human. I didn't know. I pressed on. The shoulder narrowed. The fog thickened. The voices grew louder in my head than the radio, as if the sound had seeped inside me. I could almost feel the figures moving along with me, breathing alongside me, waiting for me to make a mistake. Then, fleetingly, clarity. One fragment of a voice, clear and sharp. Turn back! He's here. The words sliced the fog of noise, and I realized I wasn't imagining it. Whatever had followed the trucker was here, and it knew me now. I gripped the wheel, hands trembling, trying to push down the fear that threatened to consume me. But the whispers didn't stop. They layered, twisted, beckoned, and I understood something in that moment. The night, the fog, the road, it wasn't just empty. It had a mind. It had memory. It had intent. And the radio was its mouthpiece. I reached the spot where the truck should have been. The asphalt glistened under the dim glow of my headlights, slick with rain, yet empty. Nothing. No neon reflectors. No orange safety lights. No massive metal hulk abandoned on the shoulder. Just the wet road, stretching into fog that seemed to swallow the horizon. My chest tightened. I circled the spot slowly, tires hissing in protest, flashlight cutting to the mist as far as it would reach. The trees pressing on either side, dark and silent. I tried to convince myself it had moved, maybe driven off in panic, but every instinct screamed otherwise. No engine sounds, no fading taillights, just gone, and that absence carried a weight heavier than any presence. I stepped out, boots squelching on the wet asphalt. The smell of rain and metal lingered in the air, but something else threaded through it. Earth? Decay? Or something fouler unseen? I shone the flashlight along the shoulder. Nothing. Not a tire mark, not a footprint. Only puddles reflecting the pale halo of my light. Yet in each reflection, I felt eyes. Not in the puddle, not in reality, but in perception. Watching, waiting. I crouched over one of the larger puddles. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw the truck there. A shadow, enormous and wrong, distorted like a funhouse mirror. But it dissolved the instant I blinked. I straightened, swallowing hard. The fog wasn't just fog anymore. It was alive, or it had memory. It could hide, it could shift, it could erase. I climbed back into the car, heart hammering. The road ahead stretched endlessly, straight and narrow, headlights failing to penetrate the mist beyond a few dozen feet. It didn't feel normal. The highway should curve, markers should pass, signs should appear. But everything looked the same. Mile after mile of fog and wet asphalt. Impossible. Endless. My pulse throbbed with unease. I pressed the accelerator, tried to escape the creeping weight pressing at my mind. The car surged, but the fog stayed. If anything, it thickened, curling around the headlights, blurring distance, swallowing everything. And then I felt it, a presence behind me. Not in the rear view, not visible, but tangible. Cold, heavy, watching, following. I twisted to glance back. Nothing. The asphalt gleamed wet and featureless. The fog held no shape, no shadow. Yet my gut said otherwise. Something moved with me. Something patient, deliberate. The static in the radio hummed, low and insistent, threading through my skull like a wire. I tried to call it in. Dispatch, Unit 7. My voice trembled, swallowed by static. The radio crackled, then whispered, distorted words again. Don't leave. He waits. I jerked my hand back, shaking. The voices weren't coming from the dispatch. Not entirely. They were stitched into the night, woven into the fog itself. The road seemed to stretch longer, straighter. Mile markers blurred together. I tried counting, tried tracking distance. Nothing. I drove on, headlights cutting through mist, puddles reflecting shapes I didn't want to see, faces elongated, half-formed, twisted with despair. They moved with me, dancing at the edges of vision, gone when I looked directly. A shadow flickered behind a tree, tall, lean, wrongly proportioned. For a second, I thought it was a person. Then the limbs stretched, the head elongated, and it vanished in the fog as if it had never existed. My breath caught. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. This wasn't normal. No human could move like that. No animal. Nothing rational existed for what I had just seen. The puddles on the shoulder caught my eye. One shimmered differently, reflecting something enormous crouched low, still. I leaned close at the window, blinked, gone, heart racing. I felt the presence again, heavier, closer. Breathing? Not mine. A sense of weight press against the car, a vibration I could feel in my chest. The highway never ended. Trees close and tighter on either side. Fog curling in impossible arcs, reflecting light in strange patterns. I realized the road itself seemed wrong, extended beyond normal limits, unbound by maps or geography. Each mile marker identical, each curve non-existent. I wasn't just lost. I was trapped in something beyond logic. I glanced back again. Shadows shifted in the rear view, not just reflections. Figures, thin, elongated, moving fluidly, almost human. Watching, waiting. Every instinct screamed to drive faster, to escape. But no matter how fast I pressed the pedal, the road remained endless. The figures never fell behind. They didn't need to. Another puddle. Reflection again. Something crouched low, pale, limbs folded wrong, staring at me. I jerked the wheel, heart slamming, sweat running down my temples. The radio hissed, words whispering, overlapping. He waits, always can't leave. I swallowed, tried to tell myself I was imagining it, but the static pressed against my mind. The shadows pressed against my perception. The cold pressed against my skin. Something was here. Something patient, something eternal. And it knew me. The fog seemed to bend around the headlights now, curling like hands. Trees stretched taller, trunks warped. Branches reached toward the car, then pulled back, almost shy, as if respecting some invisible boundary. But the figures in the shadows didn't pull back. They mirrored my every movement. A step forward. I glimpsed them behind the trees. Blink. I saw nothing. Step forward again. They were back, crouching low, tall, thin, impossible. I tried the radio again. My voice cracked. Dispatch, Unit 7, I need. Static swallowed me. Then one clear word emerged. Stay. The voice was close, intimate, pressing through my chest. I realized it wasn't coming from a radio. Not entirely. The night itself spoke. Fog, asphalt, trees, shadows, they whispered. The whispers carried intent, knowledge, curiosity. They knew me. They watched me. I drove on. Mile markers blurred. Time ceased. The wet asphalt reflected the headlights in endless shards. Each puddle a mirror, holding shapes I couldn't comprehend. Some flickered at the corner of vision. Some briefly stared directly. Shapes crouched, twisted, elongated. And always, just behind them, nothing. Or maybe someone, waiting. The presence pressed against the car again. Not a touch, but a weight, deep and insistent. My chest ached. My eyes stung. I wanted to scream, to run, to close the windows and ignore it. But I couldn't. I was aware. I was alive. And aware made me pray. Another shadow moved in the fog behind the trees. Taller, thinner, bending in impossible ways. I swerved instinctively, tires hissing on slick asphalt. It mirrored me for a heartbeat, then vanished. My pulse hammered, my chest tightened. The endless road, the endless fog, the endless eyes. There was no escape. Not here, not tonight, not ever, maybe. And then, briefly, the headlights caught a glimpse of something impossible. The truck, or a shadow of the truck, or something that had worn its shape like skin. Gone the moment I blinked. The puddles reflected it differently. always wrong. Each reflection held another fragment, another impossibility, and I understood it wasn't lost. It never left. It was part of the stretch, this endless, fog-wrapped nightmare. Waiting, watching, knowing the road ahead remained unbroken. Fog stretched infinitely. Shadows moved just beyond comprehension. I gripped the wheel, breathing ragged, realizing I had reached no destination, no exit, no relief, only this endless highway, endless fog, endless shapes, and a weight of eyes that never blinked. And somewhere in the distance, or maybe just behind, the whispers came again, woven into the night, into the asphalt, into the fog, into the radio static. He waits, always waits. The rain hit the windshield like hammers, relentless, blurring the edges of the road into a wet smear of gray and black. My wiper struggled to keep up, leaving only half the glass clear at time. Every mile of this back road felt endless, the kind of road that doesn't appear on maps unless you're looking for it. And even then, it barely exists. Dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio, soft and distant under the storm. Unit 4. Reports of screaming near Maple Hollow cabin. Caller disconnected. Ite. I frowned, tapping the mic copy. En route. Heavy rain. Visibility low. No reply. Static swallowed everything else. The road narrowed. Trees leaned over, their limbs heavy with water, dripping like broken faucets. The smell of wet pine mixed with damp earth, sharp and cold. I slowed, feeling the tires as against the slick asphalt. The cabin was supposed to be just another mile ahead, tucked off a curve in the woods. But in this fog and rain, it could have been anywhere. I remembered the call, panic in the voice, shaky, almost incoherent. Please help, screams, and then silence. I couldn't place the caller, couldn't identify them, but the urgency stuck, a thread tugging at my nerves. I had a bad feeling, one of those instincts that crawls up your spine when the world is just slightly off. Thunder rolled overhead. My headlights caught the edge of the forest, dark and dense. The puddles along the road reflected strange shapes, tree trunks that seemed to twitch, branches bending slightly as though leaning closer to watch. I shook my head. Just wet branches, just reflections, nothing more, but my chest tightened anyway. A flash of movement on the shoulder made me jerk the wheel. A raccoon maybe, or nothing. Fog swallowed the details almost instantly. I kept going. The cabin was supposed to be here. It had to be. I knew these woods, every curve and hollow, every crooked tree. But tonight, everything felt different. The radio crackled again. A static whisper, almost like someone exhaling directly into the mic. I frowned. Dispatch? Repeat, are you there? Nothing. Just the storm, the rain, the static. My hands tightened on the wheel. Then I heard it. A faint scream, muffled by the rain, distant but distinct. My pulse jumped. I slowed, scanning the tree line. Nothing but shadows and dripping limbs. Another scream, sharper this time, closer. And then a sound I couldn't identify. A scraping, dragging sound, wet and slow, just beyond the tree lean. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. The wipers swished, swirled, but the rain didn't relent. The cabin should be up ahead. It had to be. The map in my mind said it was just around the bend, hidden behind a curtain of trees. And then I saw it. A light, weak, flickering, orange, barely visible through the rain. My heart beat faster. I pulled up the driveway, tires sliding over wet gravel. The cabin was small, wooden, weather-beaten. Windows dark, curtains soaked and sticking. No car in the lot, no footprints. Only the patter of rain, heavy and constant, masking any sound beneath it. My boots squelched as I stepped out. The smell of wet wood, moss, and something metallic? Blood? I shook my head. I didn't want to think it. I raised a flashlight, sweeping the area. The porch was empty. The door closed, old and swollen from rain. I tapped lightly. Nothing. I cleared my throat. Sheriff Thomas. I got your call. Are you here? Silence. Only the rain. Only the forest pressing close. The scream came again. Closer this time. Not muffled by distance, but layered into the air around me. It didn't feel human. Not fully. Sharp, raw and fractured, like multiple voices twisting together. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run, to retreat, to get back to the safety of the patrol car. But the light, flickering inside the cabin, it drew me forward. I reached the door, with soaked and swollen, pressing under my palm. I pushed gently. It creaked open. The smell hit me first, wet, coppery, and wrong. The room was dark, the furniture slick with rainwater that had seeped through the roof. And I saw it, marks on the floor, drag marks, heavy, uneven. Something or someone had been moved across the room. My flashlight swept over the interior. The kitchen, living room, everything soaked, abandoned in haste. Chairs overturned, plates shattered on the floor. The scratching sound came again from upstairs, slow and deliberate, step by step, not heavy but not light, methodical, waiting. I gripped the railing, climbing the stairs. Each step groaned under my weight. The screams were intermittent now, echoing strangely, as if coming from the walls themselves. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. Every shadow seemed to twist, reaching, breathing, shifting. My mind told me it was nerves. My gut told me otherwise. Upstairs, the hallway stretched narrow and dark, doors on either side, slightly ajar, warped with rain and age. One door at the far end, light flickered behind it. I approached slowly. A mattress on the floor, soaked, empty. Wet footprints led from the door to the window, and then the window cracked open, rain pouring in, muddy footprints trailing down to the forest. I swallowed, hand tightening on the flashlight, the sound of scraping behind me. I spun. Nothing. Just shadows, just rain-streaked walls. The hallway seemed longer than memory suggested, stretching, bending. A chill pressed against my neck. Something whispered, low, almost beneath hearing. A voice, the wind, or someone, something. I stepped back, heart hammering. The sense of being watched intensified. Every nerve screamed, but I had to move. I had to find the source. I moved toward the bedroom door again, flashlight trembling. A figure or a shadow shifted just beyond the light, gone in a blink. I told myself it was my imagination. I wanted it to be. The scream cut sharper, louder from the forest below. A sound that split the night, ragged, impossible. And then silence. The kind of silence that presses close, that weighs on the chest. My mind raced. Did I see it leave? Did it vanish into the fog? Or was it still inside, somewhere just out of sight, watching, waiting? I forced myself back downstairs, careful, alert, every sense straining. The porch, the rain, the forest. Every step felt heavier, the night more alive. Shadows clung to the edges of my vision. Shapes darted, flickered. The world had shifted, or maybe I had. The storm pressed close, masking sounds, amplifying others. The patrol car waited in the drive, headlights cutting through the mist. I climbed in, heart still hammering. The road ahead, slick and winding, seemed darker than before. The scream had stopped, but the impression lingered, a weight in my chest. I realized, somewhere deep, that I hadn't just responded to a call. I had entered something else entirely. The radio crackled. Static, then faint, almost imperceptible. A voice, he saw you. I froze, every muscle tight. Not dispatch, not human. Something else, layered into the storm, into the fog, into the night itself. My pulse raced. I started the engine. Tires hissed on wet gravel. Headlights pierced the mist. The forest closed around me, tight and silent, heavy with the weight of unknown eyes. And I understood, suddenly, that the road back was no longer just asphalt. It was something alive, something waiting, something that had marked me the moment I stepped inside that cabin. Rain poured harder. Wind howled. The world felt wrong. I gripped the wheel, pulse thrumming, knowing that this night had only begun, and that whatever screamed in the forest wasn't finished. I stepped further inside, boots squelching on the wet floorboards. The air was thick, damp, and cold, carrying the scent of wet wood and something fouler, iron, rust, maybe blood. My flashlight carved a path through the dark, illuminating overturned furniture. Shards of glass scattered like frozen rain, and puddles reflecting a distorted, flickering light. I told myself it was empty. It had to be, but the sound came before I could convince myself. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing somewhere just beyond the walls of perception. I froze. My pulse spiked. I held my breath, straining to hear, but the rain pounded the roof, masking everything beneath its heavy rhythm. The steps stopped. I shifted, listening again. Tap, 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 then silence. Then another from the opposite side of the room. I twisted slowly, flashlight scanning. Nothing, just shadows, wet reflections, and the warped furniture staring back like accusatory eyes. The floor creaked under me as I moved toward the kitchen, each step loud in the oppressive silence. The smell grew stronger, metallic, tangy. I could almost taste it on my tongue. Footsteps again, closer this time, above me from the attic hatch. My hand trembled as I gripped the flashlight. I didn't want to go up there. Part of me screamed to run, get back to the car, and drive until fog and forest swallowed me whole. But something, curiosity or madness, propelled me forward. I climbed the narrow stairs, each creak beneath my weight echoing like a warning. The attic door was closed. Rain drummed on the roof, muffling every other sound, but the steps persisted. Tap, tap, pause drag. I could feel them move with me, though no one was there. My flashlight caught dust motes dancing in the beam, swirling like ghosts in the stagnant air. I pushed the door open slowly. The attic was small, cramped, filled with old boxes and furniture covered in sheets. Shadows pulled in the corners. My light swept across them. Nothing. No one. Yet the sound persisted. Tap, tap, a scraping across the wood. I took a cautious step forward, and the steps halted. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Then, another step behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. Only the flashlight's reflection in the puddled floor, stretching the room into a distorted funhouse mirror. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing. Something was here. I could feel it, not in sight, not physically, but present, pressing against the edges of perception. Footsteps shifted again, faster now, echoing from the stairs, then the hallway, then the far room. I tried to pinpoint them, but they danced, always just beyond comprehension, teasing me. A window rattled in its frame. The rain hammered harder. Shadows flickered across the attic walls. Impossible angles, limbs stretching, shifting. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure crouched low in the corner. Blinked, and it was gone. Just darkness. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I wanted to tell myself it was exhaustion, nerves, imagination, but the sound persisted, deliberate and relentless. I crept down the stairs, each step careful, every nerve straining. The hallway stretched long, warped. Doors appeared out of proportion, some taller, some narrower. Footsteps echoed from behind each door as I passed. I dare not open them all. Each time I glanced at the reflection of the hallway and the wet floor, I caught movement at the edges of vision, flickers of pale shapes, bending in impossible ways, vanishing when I focused. The living room offered no relief. The puddles reflected a ceiling warped like a wave, shadows moving across the walls in patterns my mind couldn't parse. I could hear it, soft, almost playful, tap, tap, tap behind me, then beside me, circling, shifting. I spun. Nothing. The flashlight's beam swung across the room. Empty chairs, broken glass, wet carpet. Empty. But the sound persisted. I moved toward the kitchen again. A drawer pulled itself open slightly. I froze. The sound of tapping paused. My heart felt like it had lodged in my throat. I stepped closer. The drawer trembled, then slammed shut. Tap, tap, drag, a shuffling rhythm now. Faster, more insistent. I backed away slowly, ears straining. The attic hatch above creaked, a long, drawn-out groan, as if something heavy had stepped on it. I reached the living room and shone the flashlight across the floor. My reflection wavered in a puddle. And then I saw it, not a reflection of me. Something crouched in the water, limbs elongated, pale, wet, twisted just enough to be human, but wrong. It stared, eyes black, hollow, unblinking. Tap, tap, it moved closer. But every time I raised the light fully, it vanished, Just water. Just a puddle. But I knew it was there. I felt it. The sound shifted upstairs. Step, step, pause, drag. I turned slowly, dread crawling up my spine. The attic hatch rattled again. The room seemed to stretch impossibly, shadows elongating, walls bending. I could hear faint whispers beneath the rain's roar, low and layered, almost words, almost screams, almost laughter. Not intelligible, just intent. Watching, waiting. I moved toward the door, leading outside. Maybe the fog would offer relief. The porch, the car, anything, but the hallway behind me rippled, walls stretching, shadows twisting in impossible arcs. Tap, 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 the sound echoed, following me, circling me just beyond sight. I could feel the weight of presence in wet air, close enough to brush my shoulder, though nothing was there. The front door didn't offer safety. The rain hammered down, pooling in puddles that reflected fleeting, impossible shapes. One puddle showed something crouched low, eyes fixed on me. Another showed nothing, but the shadows behind me moved. I forced myself forward, boots squelching on wet wood, flashlight cutting through the stormlit fog outside. I paused on the porch. The forest pressed close, wet, dark, alive. Footsteps echoed again, not from inside, not from outside, but everywhere at once. Tap, tap, drag. I could feel them circling, patient, deliberate. The wind shifted. The sound of leaves brushing against one another sounded like whispers. My pulse raced, breath ragged. Something waited in the fog, just beyond comprehension. Something had followed the echoes of the cabin, the rain, the screams. The car's headlights cut a narrow path through the mist. I wanted to run, to get back in, to drive until the forest and fog swallowed me. But the steps persisted. Tap, tap, dragging closer. They were patient, deliberate, knowing I couldn't outrun perception itself. The world seemed to stretch, fold, twist. Shadows clung to every edge. Shapes lingered just out of focus. I climbed into the car, heart hammering, drenched, every nerve on fire. The rain hit the roof. The tires hissed on wet asphalt. I stared at the cabin in the rear view. The door swayed slightly, though I hadn't touched it. Shadows pooled in the windows, moving. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed faintly, layered, overlapping, impossible to locate. I started the engine. Headlights cut a narrow path through the fog, but the forest seemed endless. The echoing steps persisted, in my mind or in reality, circling, patient, deliberate. Tap, tap, drag. The weight of being observed pressed against me. I understood suddenly. It wasn't just a cabin, not the attic, not the hallway. It had followed me out, stretched into the storm, woven itself into the night, and then silence. For a heartbeat, maybe two, the forest, the rain, the echoes paused. My chest heaved, the car idled, headlights casting long reflections in puddles on the road. Relief pressed close, but it was fragile, temporary. The steps would return, the shapes would return. The night was patient, and so was whatever had claimed the cabin, the echoes, the rain, and now me. Rain pelted the roof like a drum line, relentless, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. I stood in the cabin doorway, flashlight in hand, boots soaked, ears straining for anything beyond the storm. My chest was tight, every instinct screaming that the house was alive somehow, breathing with me, watching me. I squinted at the windows. Fog glass blurred the world outside, turning trees into ghostly streaks, shadows into shapes that suggested movement where there was none. And then I saw it, a face, just a flicker at first, pale and pressed against the condensation. Blinked, and it was gone. I swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight tighter. My pulse thundered in my ears. I shook my head. It had to be a trick of the light. The rain, exhaustion. I had been chasing shadows long enough tonight. But then another appeared. Another face, low on a window, staring, expressionless, eyes hollow. I froze. It didn't move like a person, didn't blink. It just waited. I took a cautious step closer, heart hammering. The glass was slick with rain. The reflection of my own flashlight made the faces appear and vanish with every slight shift. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed somewhere behind me, distant yet close. The familiar echoing steps in the cabin that wouldn't stop. One face appeared at the upstairs window. Pale, pressed tight against the glass, mouth slightly open. Something was wrong. Too symmetrical, too still. I leaned forward, breathing shallow, trying to catch a better look. And it moved, or I did, I couldn't tell. A twitch, just enough to suggest life, or some perversion of it. I stepped back. The porch floorboards groaned underfoot. Another face appeared behind me, pressed against the kitchen window this time. Then another in the living room. Everywhere I looked, fleeting shadows, distorted, impossible faces staring back. My mind raced. Was it exhaustion, hallucination, or was something feeding off the storm, the night, the isolation itself? I turned slowly, trying to keep track. Every window seemed to have a new face. Faces I hadn't seen a second ago, pressed tight against glass, expressionless but intent. Their eyes followed me, black pits and pale masks. I wanted to run, but the cabin felt like it had grown around me, stretching, bending, trapping me in its warped geometry. I forced myself toward the living room. Rain dripped from the ceiling in irregular patterns. Puddles forming where the wood was rotted. The reflection of the overhead light in the puddles betrayed movement at the edges of my vision. Faces appearing in the liquid, twisted, elongated, only to vanish when I looked directly. I heard the faint whisper of a voice, low and almost beneath hearing, layered under the rain. "Why are you here?" My spine stiffened. I swung the flashlight wildly. Nothing, but the faces kept coming, moving between windows, pressing against glass that wasn't there a moment before. Tap, tap, a dragging sound beneath the stairs. My stomach churned. Something was everywhere, yet nowhere. I climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight trembling. The upper hallway stretched impossibly long. Windows lined one side, each fogged and opaque. And with every step, faces appeared and disappeared, sometimes only in peripheral vision, sometimes full, staring as if judging, accusing, mocking. I blinked, shook my head, tried to convince myself it was exhaustion. But exhaustion didn't make the faces move in tandem. Didn't make them follow me from window to window. A face appeared at the far end, pale, wide-eyed, lips pulled tight. I could see the impression of fingers pressed against the glass, ridges in the fog. Tap, tap, tap. The echoing steps behind me sped up for a moment, then stopped. I froze. The hallway stretched further than it had a second ago, the walls bending slightly, almost imperceptibly, as though the cabin itself was breathing. I reached the end of the hall, chest tight. One window, fog, streaked with rain. I held my breath. The face appeared, not fleeting this time. It lingered, pressed tight against the glass. Eyes wide, unblinking. Mouth moving, no sound. I leaned closer, straining, heart hammering. And then, in that reflection, I saw another pair of eyes behind me, spinning around, flashlight swinging, nothing. Tap, tap, tap. The echoing steps from earlier, circling, deliberate. Somewhere above, a floorboard groaned. The rain drowned most sounds, but not all. Something moved against the windows. Shapes twisting in impossible angles. Faces pressed against glass that hadn't been there moments ago. My pulse raced, breath shallow. I tried to reach the stairs. One step, another, a face at the bottom window, distorted, pressed tight, watching. Tap, tap, drag. The footsteps followed, circling, patient, inevitable. I realized that wherever I went, the faces multiplied, reflected in puddles, fog glass, wet surfaces, always watching, waiting. I couldn't escape sight itself. I paused on the landing. Sweat ran into my eyes, stinging. My flashlight flickered. For a moment, I thought I saw all the faces merge into one, a single elongated visage pressed against every window, eyes hollow and infinite. I blinked. Gone. Just reflections again. But the feeling remained of being observed, judged, trapped. I forced myself down the stairs. The cabin seemed to shift underfoot. Puddles rippled with faces that shouldn't exist. Shadows bent into impossible shapes. Tap, tap, tap. A whisper. Stay, don't leave. I froze. Not my imagination. Not the storm. Something spoke to me. Through the rain. Through the fog. through the windows themselves. The front door yawned ahead, slick and wet. I wanted to open it, run into the fog, drive until the storm swallowed me whole. But the faces persisted, pressing, appearing, vanishing, always just out of reach, always waiting. Tap, tap, drag, and in the upstairs window, one last face, wide-eyed, mouth opening slowly, a scream without sound. I opened the door. Cold rain hit my face. Fog swallowed the road ahead. Puddles reflected shapes that twisted and writhed. Faces pressed close, just beneath the surface. Tap, tap, tap. The echoing steps had followed me outside. Somewhere in the fog, shapes waited. I got in the patrol car, hands trembling, heart hammering, rain streaming down the windshield. Headlights cut a narrow path through the mist. I couldn't tell what was ahead. The cabin receded behind me, but the faces lingered in memory, in every reflection, every fleeting shadow, every stretch of foggy glass. I understood, suddenly, that I had glimpsed something patient, deliberate, and infinite, something that didn't need to chase. It simply waited, and it would always be there in the windows and the reflections in the night. The rain fell harder. Wind howled. Shadows pressed close. And I knew the night wasn't over. The faces were patient. And so was the thing behind them. The cabin had grown smaller. Or maybe I had grown larger. Every corner felt closer, walls bending and subtly, as if the house itself were watching, waiting. Rain hammered on the roof with a fury I had never heard before, drumming in time with my pulse. I tried to move toward the front door again, hoping to escape the oppressive weight pressing in from every shadow corner. The handle rattled in my hand. I turned it hard, and it gave way, but then froze. The door wouldn't open. Panic rose in my chest, sharp and sudden. I tried again. Nothing. My reflection in the wet glass beside the door stared back at me, eyes wide, hands trembling, and then the first slam came, hard, violent, echoing to the cabin like a gunshot. My heart leapt. I spun, flashlight swinging, but the hallway behind me was empty. Nothing moved. The steps I had followed before were gone. Tap, tap, tap. The echo had returned, but now it was irregular, unpredictable, a rhythm that didn't belong to any human stride. I pressed my back against the wall, breath shallow, trying to convince myself it was only the storm, only the old board settling. Another slam, this one behind me. I whipped around. The kitchen door banged against its frame, swinging slightly, though there was no wind. I approached, hands shaking, each step careful, deliberate. The lock was broken. Not jammed, broken. Rusted, but recently forced. Something had been inside, or had entered just now. I tried the living room door. Slam. Lock failed. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps had returned. They weren't just outside anymore. They moved inside, circling, patient, deliberate. I realized I couldn't tell where they were coming from. Upstairs? Behind me? The shadows and corners seemed to thicken, bulge, almost pulse with their own presence. I backed into the hall, flashlight darting. One window, fogged and streaked with rain. I froze. In the reflection, a figure moved behind me, pale, indistinct. I spun, empty. Tap, tap, tap. The sound followed, circling, closer, then receding. I could feel it in my chest, in the sweat running down my spine, eyes unseen, watching, calculating. The front door slammed again. Hard, violent. I jumped back, breathing heavy, flashlight flickering. I tried to lock again. Failed. My fingers slid across the cold metal. There was a vibration, subtle, like a heartbeat. Not mine, something else, something in the walls, or in the air. A presence, patient and unseen, pressing against me. I ran to the back door. Slam. Lock broken. Tap, tap, drag. The footsteps, echoing, circling, relentless. I felt trapped. My mind spun with images, faces and windows, distorted reflections in puddles, shadows that weren't my own. The storm outside was loud, but it did nothing to drown the presence here. Inside, waiting. I slammed my flashlight against the wall, trying to dispel the fear, but the shadows didn't recede. They thickened, I could feel them pressing from all sides. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of wet wood and something metallic like rust or blood. The cabin had become a cage, and the locks were meaningless. Another slam, this time upstairs. The ceiling groaned under some weight moving above me. Tap, 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 slower, deliberate. Then a whisper, low, almost beneath hearing. "Don't leave, stay." My stomach dropped. It wasn't the storm, not the rain, not the wind. Something inside the cabin spoke. Through the walls, through the locks, through the air itself. I tried to leave again. Front door, slam. Lock broken. I banged on it with my fists. Nothing. The door wouldn't give. Tap, tap, drag. The footsteps now accompanied by a low, scraping sound, like fingernails against wood. Behind me, the hallway stretched impossibly long, doors bulging slightly, windows fogging as if exhaling. Every reflection caught something moving just at the edge of vision. I backed into the living room. Every door, every lock had failed. My own patrol radio vibrated in my pocket. Static crackling with whispers beneath the interference. Faces I had seen press against the windows before flickered in puddles on the floor. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm accelerated. Faster, irregular, chaotic. The presence was no longer patient. It was aware I knew, aware I wanted to escape. I darted toward the stairs, flashlight beam shaking. The steps groaned, warped. Upstairs, doors swung slightly, then slammed shut on their own. A low moan came from somewhere above. I froze, listening. Tap, tap, drag. Another whisper. "You can't leave." Cold air washed over my neck, icy, wet. My hair stood on end. I could feel eyes behind every surface, in every reflection. I tried a side window. Locked. Slam. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps followed me, inside the house, outside the window, circling, impossible to locate. I pounded on the glass. Nothing. Reflection. Faces pressed tight. Eyes hollow. Mouths moving in silent screams. I stumbled back, chest heaving, trying to force rational thought. There was none. I crouched in the hallway. Flashlight low. Doors continued to slam. Locks failed. The presence tightening its grip around me. The storm was a constant roar outside, but inside, it was a cabin itself that howled, groaned, breathed. Tap, tap, drag. Closer now. Scraping, whispering, circling. I realized I wasn't alone. Hadn't been alone since I stepped in. Something had been watching, waiting, learning. I forced myself to move again. Front door. Slam. Lock broken. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps now pacing rhythm of my own heart. I backed away, trying to buy time, trying to plan. Reflection caught in a puddle. Faces. Pressed tight. Watching. Smiling faintly, impossibly. Tap, tap, drag. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Doors swelled slightly, warped. Windows fog in sync with my breath. Another slam, closer now. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, through my chest. Tap, tap, tap. I felt trapped, pressed, suffocating. Something unseen pressed against me. Patient no longer. The whispers grew louder, layered. Stay, stay, stay. My fingers slid over another lock. Cold. Metal. Failed. I turned to the far corner of the living room. A door I hadn't noticed before, narrow, unassuming. I approached cautiously. Tap, tap, drag. The footsteps slowed suddenly, then stopped. Silence. Too heavy. The air thickened. Fog windows. Reflections. Faces. My pulse thundered. I reached for the door handle. It turned. Smooth, though the wood was old, warped. I pulled. The door swung open into darkness. Absolute. A draft cold enough to bite. Tap, tap, dragged behind me. I dared not look. Something had followed me this far. Something had waited. And in the darkness beyond that door, I knew the cabin's grip had not loosened. It had only extended. I stepped through, cautious. The floorboards groaned beneath me. The door slammed shut behind me of its own accord. I pounded, tried to open it. Failed. Tap, tap, tap. The sound moved along with me. The whispers continued. Faces flickered in my peripheral vision. I pressed forward, breath ragged. body shaking. The cabin had become a labyrinth, locks meaningless, doors useless, walls alive with the unseen. Every instinct screamed to run, but the cabin had no exits left. Every reflection, every window, every shadow was a trap. The presence moved with me, above me, beside me, below me. Tap, 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 the rhythm impossible, infinite. I realized the locks had never been meant to keep me out. They had been meant to keep me in. And now I was inside, trapped, watched, followed. Every slam, every failed lock, every whisper, every reflection told me the same thing. Escape was not an option. The house had won. And the presence? It was patient, infinite, waiting for the next step, the next breath, the next heartbeat. I didn't know how long I had been moving through the darkness. The whispers, the slamming doors. I only knew I couldn't stop. I couldn't hide. I couldn't leave. The cabin had taken everything, sound, light, reflection, time itself, and folded it into its walls. Tap, 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 and somewhere in the darkness, I knew the presence had smiled. The locks had failed. The doors had failed. And I was alone. The road up to the old mill was a ribbon of cracked asphalt, swallowed by fog that seemed to thicken with every turn. My cruiser's headlights cut narrow slits through the gray, illuminating nothing but the damp edges of grass and the occasional skeletal tree. I got a call an hour ago. Trespassers reported inside the abandoned mill, but I already knew no one would be there. At least no one human. The air smelled of rust and wet earth, sharp and metallic. My boots crunched over gravel. As I approached the main entrance, the mill loomed above me, dark, hulking, windows like black eyes staring through the fog. The boards covering the doors rattled in the wind, though the night was still. My hand itched for my flashlight, the one I kept in my patrol vest, though the cruiser's beams did a decent job piercing the gloom. I stepped onto the wooden ramp, leading to the side entrance. Each board groaned under my weight. A sudden squeak echoed from inside. I froze, breath caught. The wind hadn't moved, rain hadn't started, yet the sound had come from somewhere deeper within. A door swinging, maybe, or machinery. Forgotten decades ago, awakening with a stir of my presence. Another groan, louder this time. I flicked on my flashlight. The beam cut across the interior. Shadow girders, chains dangling like snakes, pulleys coated with rust. But movement, tiny, subtle, almost imperceptible, made me step back. One chain swayed, slowly, as if it had been pulled. No wind, no one there, just the metal shivering in the light. I raised my radio, but static greeted me first. Dispatch, I whispered, voice tight. I'm at the mill. Can you? Crackle. Then silence. Only the faint hum of forgotten motors seemed to answer. Motors that shouldn't run. I swallowed. Something in the back of my mind whispered that I wasn't supposed to be here, that stepping inside might change that. Footsteps, or the sound of them, echoed from the far side of the main hall. Heavy, deliberate, though no one was there. I pivoted, flashlight sweeping. Shadows pooled in the corners, distorted by the grime-covered windows. The beam caught a pulley overhead, spinning slowly, squeaking in a rhythm that didn't match the wind or any natural movement. I realized my pulse had matched it without noticing. Slow, thudding, a companion to the sound. I stepped forward, cautious. Each footfall felt amplified, reverberating through the hollow structure. Chains clinked, boards creaked. Somewhere above, a pulley rattled against its frame, then still. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the far wall, irregular, random, deliberate. My skin crawled. My mind wanted a rational explanation. Maybe a rat, maybe a loose piece of machinery. But the rhythm, the pattern, made me think otherwise. Something else had learned the space, moved with it, waited. The flashlight beam found an old conveyor belt, its metal plates coated with decades of dust and oil. One plate moved, slowly, minutely. I swallowed. The belt hadn't had power in decades. I stepped closer, tried to convince myself it was just gravity, some subtle slope causing a chain reaction. But then a lever rattled above, and the belt jolted forward. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed around me. Not mechanical. Not entirely. like fingernails brushing metal. I froze. My hands tightened around the flashlight. My breath puffed in white clouds, though the air wasn't cold. Another squeal of iron, more deliberate this time. My pulse raced. The mill was alive in a way it shouldn't have been. Shadows shifted in the corner of my eyes. Shapes moved briefly, then disappeared. Tap, tap, drag. The floorboards somewhere deeper groaned, as if something had walked them. Something unseen. I moved down the central aisle. Flashlight scanning. Piles of discarded equipment leaned against walls. Gears, rusted cogs, belts, all long abandoned. Yet the beam revealed subtle movement. A gear spun an inch. A lever swayed. No wind. No human hand. My radio crackled again. Static. And then a whisper, almost beneath hearing, "Leave." I froze, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Only the machines, swaying and creaking. Tap, tap, tap. My footstep echoed. The sound mimicked it. Or maybe it didn't. I spun, beam swinging, trying to catch anything in motion. Shadows pulled, thickening. One chain overhead swung, though no wind stirred. A pulley rattled. Tap, tap, drag. Across the far wall, boards shifted. I could almost feel a presence moving along them, patient, circling, invisible. My pulse thudded against my ears. I moved closer to the main control room, doors hanging crooked on their hinges. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm followed me. I pressed forward. Light flickered across old panels, dials frozen in rust. A lever quivered. A belt shifted. The faint, metallic whisper of movement whispered in my ears, just enough for me to question whether I was hearing the machines or something else, something that had been waiting for me to arrive. I tried the radio again. Dispatch, a burst of static, and then the same whisper, almost a hiss. "Go now." My grip on the flashlight tightened. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the path back felt different. Longer, narrower. Shadows seemed to stretch across the floor, walls leaning toward me. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps, moving, always moving just behind, beside, unseen. I rounded a corner into the central hall. The mill's old turbines loomed in darkness, metal teeth coated with rust, silent for decades. And yet, one rotated slowly, imperceptibly. The sound, a subtle hum, grew, blending with the tapping, dragging rhythm around me. I couldn't tell if the sound was above, below, or everywhere at once. I swallowed. My breath caught. Every fiber of my being screamed that I wasn't alone. A door slammed somewhere behind me, echoing through the cavernous space. Tap, tap, tap. The belt jolted forward. A lever rattled. My pulse matched the rhythm. My hands shook. I realized then, as I glanced across the room, that every machine, every gear, every pulley was moving imperceptibly, almost lazily, as if responding to some unseen conductor. My reflection caught in a small, cracked window pane. Eyes wide, hands trembling. I felt watched, not by humans. Something else, older, patient, alive in forgotten machinery. I backed toward the exit. Tap, tap, drag. A conveyor plate shifted sharply beneath my foot, though it hadn't moved before. My heart leapt. The machines weren't just moving, they were aware. Each squeal, each groan, each tap seemed timed with my steps, my breaths, my fear. The building itself felt conscious, alive in a way no one could understand. The whispers in the radio returned. "Stay, stay." I shook my head. The voice didn't belong to anyone I knew, or any living being. The main entrance came into view. The ramp sagged under decades of decay. I ran. Tap, tap, tap. The sound followed, echoing, shifting, almost mocking. The door groaned as I pushed it open, but the pull of the mill's presence didn't release me. A chain rattled above, a lever shifted, and a pulley spun slowly in the darkness. Tap, tap, drag. The rhythm, endless, patient, insistent. I stumbled outside, rain hitting my face, grounding me in cold reality. Yet I could still hear it. The machines inside hadn't stopped. They waited, watching, learning. I didn't look back. Headlights cut through fog, road wet and glistening. But the sound stayed in my mind. Tap, tap, drag. A rhythm that would follow me, long after I left the mill behind. a presence in rust and wood, patient, endless, aware. And in that moment, I knew the mill would never be empty. Not really. Not as long as the machines remembered me. The first note hit me before I could even see the source. A high, thin whistle curling through the shadows of the mill. I froze mid-step, boots echoing on the warped floorboards. My flashlight swung, catching jagged beams of rusted machinery. Conveyor belts still glistening with old oil, chains hanging like coiled serpents. Nothing moved, and yet the whistle persisted, weaving between the gears and pulleys, impossibly precise. I told myself it was the wind, whistling through cracks and gaps in the old boards. But the air inside was still heavy, wet with decades of decay. The sound shifted, circling me. I turned slowly, tracing it, my pulse quickening. Each note seemed to follow my steps, growing faintly louder when I stopped, fading when I moved. Tap, tap, a subtle rhythm from the floorboards, my boots or something else. I pressed deeper into the main hall. The turbines loomed overhead, rusted teeth frozen, yet faint vibrations hummed beneath my feet. The whistle threaded between the shadows, impossible to pinpoint. My hand brushed a pulley, and it swung gently, responding or pretending to respond to my presence. I couldn't tell. A board creaked above, faint but distinct. Something moved in the rafters, something that had no name. The smell hit me then, metal, oil, and something else. Coppery, warm, like blood that had been left to dry. I gagged. My flashlight beam caught an old conveyor belt. A gear spun a fraction, a single tooth moving against rusted cogs. Yet the rest of the machine was still. The whistle rose a half step, mocking, teasing. It was a voice without a body, an invitation I didn't want but couldn't ignore. I tried the radio. Dispatch, something's in here. Static swallowed my words. Then the faintest whisper overlaid on the whistle. Follow. My skin crawled. I spun. The beam of the flashlight cut through black, highlighting the piles of machinery, and used, discarded, but each shadow seemed alive. A wheel turned an inch. A lever rattled. Not wind, not gravity. Something was learning me. I took a step toward the old control room. The whistle shifted, dancing between the turbines, echoing in ways that shouldn't exist in an empty building. Tap, tap, drag. Something brushed the floor, unseen but present. My flashlight caught the edge of a board leaning against the wall. Then it moved, slowly sliding forward, as if nudged by a hand that didn't exist. I swallowed hard. My instinct screamed to turn back, but curiosity rooted me in place. I traced the source to the second floor. Steps creaked above me, too heavy to be a rat, too deliberate to be coincidence. The whistle followed, circling, rising and falling like a breath. My flashlight swung across the old machinery. Rusted pulleys, belts frayed with age, chains coiled in corners. All still, all silent, and yet alive. I could feel in the vibration under my boots, the almost imperceptible hum in the air. A door slammed somewhere to the left. My heart leapt, thumping against my ribs. I shone the light there. Empty. Boards shifted on their own, hinges groaning. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm matched my heartbeat, and then it diverged, faster now, taunting, chasing. I realized the whistle had a pattern, subtle, human-like almost, but warped wrong. It repeated a phrase in a way only I could hear. Follow, follow, follow. I backed into a corner. The whistle circled the room like a predator, spinning in the shadows. My reflection in a cracked window caught me. Wide eyes, pale face, sweat mixing with the oil grime on my hands. Tap, drag. A floorboard shifted somewhere behind me. I swung the flashlight, and for a split second, a shadow moved against the wall. Too fast to be human, too solid to be a trick of the light. I moved down the aisle between turbines. The whistle rose and fell as if tracking me. Each gear I passed shivered slightly, some barely perceptible, some more obvious. One pulley rattled overhead, then stopped. Another belt twitched. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps echoed, but not mine. Something mirrored my movements, yet it had its own rhythm. My pulse tried to sync with it, but it was chaotic, unpredictable, endless. I reached the mezzanine, rusted rails under my hands. Below, the turbine seemed darker, heavier, as if swallowing the weak flashlight glow. The whistle lingered, high and thin, circling, weaving, tap, tap, drag, and then a clatter, metal against metal. From the far end of the floor, I froze, breath shallow. My own reflection caught again in a pain, eyes wide, but I swear for a heartbeat, someone or something was behind me. No face, just presence pressing close. I gritted my teeth, stepping forward. The whistle rose, higher now, louder. Each note seemed to vibrate the air, pressing into my chest. I tried the radio again, voice trembling. Dispatch, you need to... Static, a whisper overlaid it. Don't stop. The sound felt alive, feeding on me, teaching me something I didn't want to learn. My flashlight caught an old lever. It rattled violently, then froze. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm changed faster, mimicking my steps. The building, the machines, the unseen force. It was testing me. I backed toward the stairs. The whistle moved faster now, circling, weaving through the beams, through my ears, through my chest. Each gear I passed twitched again, each chain shivered. A pulley above swung sharply, almost in time with my heartbeat. Tap, 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 and then the sound changed, drag, drag, something heavy moving somewhere above. I looked up, but the shadows swallowed everything. I realized then, every machine in the mill had noticed me. Each movement, each squeal, each shift of rusted metal was a heartbeat of the place. The whistle threaded between them, a song of warning and command, guiding me through corridors I didn't remember existing. Tap, tap, drag. The rhythm pulled me forward, deeper, toward the unknown heart of the mill. I reached the central turbine room. Massive gears loomed, still coated in rust and dust, yet one turned imperceptibly. The whistle rose and fell, threading through the machinery, higher and sharper, circling me, teasing. Tap, tap, tap. Something brushed against my arm. My flashlight swung, catching nothing but shadows. Another brush, again, nothing tangible, yet unmistakable. The mill wasn't empty. It never had been. I tried to leave. Each exit I found seemed wrong, elongated, distorted. The whistle guided me, circling, teasing, insisting. Tap, tap, drag. I understood now. I wasn't just being followed. I was being taught. The mill, the machines, the whistle, they were one. All aware, all patient, waiting for me to notice, to obey, or to vanish. I stopped at a staircase, metal steps rusted and groaning. The whistle spiraled higher, faster, almost overwhelming. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm synced with my heartbeat, then diverged, chaotic, dissonant. I felt the presence everywhere now, under the floor, behind the walls, pressing to the rusted machines. The whistle circled, and I realized it wasn't just a sound. It was a guide, a lure, a warning, and I didn't know which. I took a trembling step down. Tap, drag, a belt shifted beneath my feet. Chains rattled, pulleys squealed. The whistle rose, almost screaming now, threading through shadows. My flashlight caught movement in the corner. A shadow detached from darkness, stretched impossible, and vanished before I could focus. My pulse thundered. Every instinct screamed to run, but the mill, the whistle, it wanted me to follow. I reached the main floor again. The turbines groaned in slow, deliberate movement, pulleys swaying, chains rattling. Tap, tap, drag. The whistle lingered, circling, threading, a melody of warning I couldn't understand. I realized the mill wouldn't let me leave yet. Not fully, not until it decided I had learned enough, or until it decided I belonged. I backed toward the exit, flashlight beam trembling. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm followed me, but the whistle faded, retreating slightly, still circling, still teasing. I didn't look back, not fully. I knew if I did, I might see the shadow again, or worse, understand the melody it played. Outside, the rain hit my face, grounding me, but the whistle lingered, distant yet persistent. Tap, tap, drag, in the cold, wet night. I realized the mill had learned me as much as I had learned it, and somewhere in the shadows, among rusted gears and swinging chains, something waited, patient aware, alive. I didn't stay to understand it. I didn't want to. But I knew the mill would whistle again. The air inside the mill was thick, damp, almost pulsing. My flashlight cut through the gloom, carving narrow tunnels of light. But the shadows between the beams seemed to stretch further than they should. I froze, breath catching. Something had moved, or maybe I had imagined it. But my gut said otherwise. A figure flickered at the edge of my vision. Tall, thin, impossibly still. I swung the flashlight, and the beam caught nothing but dust motes dancing in the stale air. My pulse hammered, tapped a subtle creak above, and I felt the weight of eyes pressing from the darkness. I told myself it was a machinery settling, rusted metal groaning under its own weight. But then a shadow elongated across the wall, bending around the beam, folding unnaturally, as if the rules of physics didn't apply. I moved forward, boots squeaking on the floorboards. Every step made the shadows twitch. Something mirrored me, just out of the corner of my eye. One moment a vague shape, the next gone. The whistle from earlier had faded, leaving silence thick enough to choke on. Tap, drag. The faintest scraping sound followed me through the central room. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. And yet, I knew I wasn't alone. The beams overhead seemed to reach lower, curling toward me like grasping fingers. I ducked instinctively, and a shadow flitted across the floor in the same motion, keeping pace without effort. My flashlight trembled in my grip. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, that the mill played cruel games with angles and reflections, but the air felt charged, aware of me, testing me. I climbed a narrow staircase, chains rattling overhead. The shadows seemed to stretch, then vanish, then return in ways that made no sense. I stopped halfway, flashlight sweeping the floor below. Two shapes, barely more than dark outlines, leaned against a beam, then vanished as I blinked. My heart pounded. Something was learning how I moved, where I looked. Tap, tap. The floorboards under the old mezzanine shifted, as if echoing my hesitation. I followed a narrow catwalk, metal under my boots vibrating faintly with every step. Shadows pooled in corners, curling into forms I couldn't name. I swear I glimpsed a face pressed against a railing, pale and blurred, then gone. My reflection caught in an old window, eyes wide, pale face. But for a fraction of a second, I saw another behind me. No features, just presence. I spun, flashlight sweeping. Nothing. The whistle from before returned, faint, high-pitched, threading between the shadows. Tap, drag, a rhythm syncing with the movement of the beams, with my own pulse. I pressed forward, leaning close to the wall to avoid what I couldn't see. The shadows shifted. A thin figure stepped from a corner, tall and motionless, then dissipated like smoke when my light hit it. My stomach turned. I tried to breathe slowly, tried to focus on the solid reality around me. But the mill seemed to pulse, alive with quiet mockery. I reached the main turbine room. The gears were silent now, yet shadows moved over them, bending around shafts and pulleys in impossible ways. Tap, tap, drag. Something brushed past my shoulder. I swung, beam cutting empty air. My grip tightened on the flashlight. The shadows clung to machinery, slithering along belts, pulling at the base of towers of rusted metal. Each step made them twist further, following me without moving. I tried the radio. Static, then a whisper, faint, almost playful. Why do you hide? My stomach sank. I spun again, catching only darkness between the beams. Tap, a creak overhead. I glanced up. A shadow stretched across the ceiling, long and thin, folding unnaturally around a crossbeam. It flicked, and I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Gone. I blinked. Gone. Only the faint vibration of metal under my feet remained. I edged toward the central control platform. Shadows darted across the floor, elongating, bending, folding. Each one seemed to anticipate me, testing my reactions. I realized they weren't following, at least not in the conventional sense. They were studying me, learning my rhythm, mirroring my fear. Tap, 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 a subtle echo from the floorboards. My flashlight caught a fleeting silhouette behind a column. I froze. It was only there for a heartbeat, but it felt deliberate, watching, waiting. A whisper threaded through the mill, faint, almost teasing. Closer. The shadows pulse in response, stretching, curling around beams and machinery. I swallowed hard, moving slowly, flashlight shaking. Every beam overhead now seemed to bend slightly toward me, stretching impossibly, like the mill itself had memory. I could feel the air thicken, press against my chest. Tap, drag. The rhythm moved from floor to walls, wrapping around me. I climbed the platform stairs, chains rattling faintly in the shadows. The shapes followed, folding into angles that made no sense. One flickered beside me for a heartbeat. Tall, featureless, pale. Gone before I could focus. Tap, tap. A floorboard shifted directly under me. I froze, chest tight. The shadows leaned closer, curling like smoke along the beams, stretching toward me but never touching. I tried to leave. Every corridor I approached seemed wrong, longer, narrower, twisting beyond logic. Shadows slipped along the walls, between beams, dancing just out of reach. Tap, drag. The sound moved with me, accelerating when I paused, slowing when I moved. I realized the mill was guiding me, testing me, shaping my path. Each shadow a lesson, each flicker a warning. The whistle returned, threading through the figures, high-pitched and faintly mocking. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm matched the shadows' movements. One shape appeared fully on a beam overhead. Long, thin, leaning forward, faceless. I gasped, flashlight swinging and it flickered, breaking into strands of shadow that drifted away. I backed into the platform railing, trying to catch my breath. I caught a glimpse of another figure, just beyond the beam, crouched low, then gone before I could confirm. Tap, drag. The rhythm continued, echoing beneath my boots, through the floorboards, threading through the machinery. I realized I wasn't navigating the mill. I was being observed by it. Every shadow, every flicker, every stretch of darkness was alive in some impossible way. I moved cautiously toward the stairs, hoping to reach the first floor. Shadows stretched along the beams, bending and twisting, folding around corners. Tap, tap, tap. One flicker across the railing, a tall, featureless shape vanishing before my eyes. The mill wasn't just haunted. It was aware, deliberate, teaching me fear, measuring my steps, guiding me deeper into its dark heart. I reached the floorboards above the main hall. The shadows leaned closer, stretching impossibly from beams to walls. Tap, tap, drag. A whisper tickled my ear. Stay. My heartbeat thundered, echoing the rhythm. One figure appeared fully for a second, thin and pale, leaning impossibly from the ceiling. Gone before I blinked. My flashlight trembled in my hands. I edged toward the exit. The shadows curled, stretched, and folded as if alive, falling always just beyond reach. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm moved across the floor, up the walls, through the beams. I understood. They weren't trying to harm me. Not yet. They were teaching, observing, testing. And the mill, the shadows, the whistle, all were one entity, patient, watching. Outside, the rain pattered against the broken windows. The whistle lingered faintly, threads of sound reaching out from the darkness within. Shadows receded slightly but remained, clinging to the corners, waiting. I knew I'd return, whether I wanted to or not. The mill had marked me, and somewhere between beams and machinery, the figures waited, patient, aware, alive. I stepped out, shivering, flashlight bobbing. The mill loomed behind me, silent, yet alive in ways I couldn't describe. Tap, tap, drag. Faint echoes followed me into the night, and I realized the shadows had lessons still to teach. The moment I stepped onto the upper walkway, I felt the floor protest under my weight. A groan echoed through the mill, faint at first, then rising, like the building itself was warning me away. I froze, flashlight sweeping across warped boards and rusted beams. Tap, creak. The old would shiver beneath me, and a chill ran down my spine. Something about this floor felt wrong. I moved slowly, boots careful, each step measured. Shadows twisted in the corners, stretching along the beams like black smoke. The whistling had returned, faint, wavering, threading between the machinery. Tap, creak. I heard it again. Beneath the wood, A subtle scuttling, rhythmic, deliberate. I swallowed hard, gripping my flashlight like a lifeline. The sound was too fast for rats. Too deliberate. I stepped near the railing, shining the light below. Nothing, just darkness. The floorboard stretching endlessly, warped and broken. And then a shift, tap, a groan of splintering wood under my weight. My heart leapt into my throat. I froze mid-step. The flashlight beam trembled as the floor beneath me gave a sudden, violent snap. I fell, chest first, into darkness. Dust and debris clouded my vision, scraping my skin and filling my nose. A sharp pain flared in my shoulder as I hit the wooden beams below. I scrambled up, coughing, trying to focus through the haze. The whistling seemed louder now, more insistent, echoing from beneath the floor. Tap, tap. Something moved in the shadows, just out of reach. I shined the light down through the hole I'd fallen through. Something crawled there, slick and sinuous, moving against gravity in ways that shouldn't be possible. Tap, tap. The floor vibrated under me as the thing twisted, vanishing into the gaps between beams. My stomach turned, every instinct screaming at me to get out. I climbed to my feet, flashlight trembling. The upper walkway groaned again, each step threatening to give way. Shadows clung to the beams, stretching toward the hole I'd fallen through. Tap, drag. I realized the sounds weren't just beneath me. They were part of the mill itself, embedded in the boards, alive. Something watched, waited. I edged along the walkway, careful to avoid the weak spots, eyes scanning for movement. Shadows flickered, twisting in corners and gaps. A faint whisper brushed my ear, almost teasing. Closer. Tap, tap. I realized it wasn't the wind. It was rhythm, intentional, echoing beneath the floorboards, guiding something toward me. I crouched low, moving along a safer patch of wood. The mill's machinery loomed above, silent, yet shadows shifted across it as if alive. Tap. Something scuttled along the beams below. Faster now, urgent. I shone my light down. Eyes, small, glinting, reflecting the beam from holes in the floor. Not animal eyes. Something else. The shapes twisted, thin and flexible, crawling like smoke made solid. I took a step back. Another tap, creak, and the wood beneath me trembled again. I jumped to the next board, heart pounding, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Shadows flickered at the edges, moving in impossible ways. I realized the mill wasn't just haunted. It was hungry, feeding on my fear, learning my movements. Tap, tap, the rhythm quickened. I tried the radio. Static, then a whisper, faint but deliberate. Why do you linger? My stomach sank. I swung the flashlight, catching movement beneath the floorboards. A thin, crawling figure, faceless, slithering through the gaps like a shadow made flesh. Tap, tap. It moved with purpose, circling, waiting for me to misstep. I froze, watching it. The boards groaned again under me. One gave slightly, a warning, not a collapse. Tap, drag. I realized each sound was a signal, a test. I had to read the rhythm or fall. Another step, careful. Another groan. Shadows twisted on the walls, curling like smoke along the beams, moving in response to my breathing, my heartbeat. I edged toward the central platform. A floorboard beneath me flexed dangerously, cracking a thin line. Tap, tap. I leapt over it, landing hard, flashlight skittering across the boards. Shadows jumped with me, curling along the edges of the walkway. I glanced down. The crawling thing paused, tilting its head as if aware I was watching. Its form shifted, stretching impossibly to fill the gaps, then vanished. Tap, tap. Silence followed, pregnant with intent. I tried to push past it, moving toward the staircase leading to the first floor. The boards under my boots trembled, twisting, groaning. Tap, tap, drag. The rhythm echoed beneath me. I realized the floor was alive in some sense, reacting to my presence. The shadows, the crawling shapes, the rhythm, they were one entity. A test, a trap. Halfway to the stairs, a board beneath me buckled. I jumped instinctively. Tap, a sharp scrape beneath the wood. I swung my flashlight and caught a glimpse. Pale, featureless limbs curling around the beams, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. My heart hammered. I tried to breathe, to calm myself, but the mill throbbed beneath me, responding to my fear. Tap, tap, the rhythm pulsed through the wood, up into my boots, into my chest. I reached the stairs. The wood there seemed sturdier, less reactive. I climbed cautiously, each step measured. Shadows clung to the beams, twisting, stretching downward, as if reaching for me. Tap, tap. I caught a glimpse of the crawling figure slipping through the gaps between boards below, following me. Its movement was deliberate, almost sentient. I reached the first floor landing. The boards groaned again, but held. Tap, tap, drag. The rhythm moved with me. I shone the flashlight down the staircase I had just climbed. Nothing, but the air felt thick, charged. I realized the mill had learned my pace, my rhythm, the crawling shapes, the shifting shadows, the groaning floor. It had adapted, responding to me, anticipating me. I paused, chest heaving, flashlight beam trembling. Shadows curled along the walls, stretching toward the hole I had fallen through. Tap, tap, a faint scuttling echoed beneath the floorboards. Something watched from below, waiting for me to misstep, to fall again. I swallowed hard, realizing escape wasn't just about moving. It was about moving right. I edged toward the main exit, flashlight sweeping. The shadows twisted, bending in ways that made no sense. Tap, tap, drag. I realized the rhythm was teaching me, warning me. The crawling shapes had retreated slightly, observing, their forms still shifting through the gaps. A faint whisper threaded through the mill. One more step, my stomach twisted, but I moved forward, careful, deliberate. The exit loomed ahead, light faint through broken windows. Shadows stretched along the floorboards, thin and curling, watching. Tap, tap, the rhythm echoed beneath me, urging me on. I realized the mill wasn't finished with me. The floorboards, the shapes, the shadows, they were alive, patient, waiting for the next mistake. I stepped outside, heart racing, flashlight beam bobbing. The rain pattered against the mill, masking the faint scuttling beneath the boards. I glanced back. Darkness pooled in the broken windows. Shadows twisting impossibly between beams. Tap, tap, drag, faint, deliberate, following me into the night. I knew I hadn't escaped. The mill had marked me. The rhythm, the shadows, the crawling things, they were patient, waiting, teaching, and I realized the next time I entered, it would know even more. I ran before thinking, boots slapping wet grass as I stumbled out of the mill. Rain soaked through my jacket, cold biting at my skin, but I barely noticed. All that mattered was getting away from that building. The floorboards, the shadows, the crawling things. They were behind me now, or so I thought. I stopped for a second, chest heaving, and the world felt off. The mill loomed ahead, but the angle was different. The broken windows looked taller, narrower, like they were stretching upward. I blinked, thinking exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Tap, a faint groan from within the structure. Not loud, almost polite, but deliberate. I swallowed hard, and something in me told me it wasn't over. I turned to move through the clearing. Trees I remembered as sparse now seemed thicker, closer, their trunks bending just slightly, as if leaning in to watch me. I could swear I heard whispers among the branches, soft, almost drowned by the rain, but unmistakable. Words I didn't understand, just tones, mocking, curious, patient. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was fatigue. My flashlight was still clutched in my hand, beams slicing through the dim gray of rain, illuminating shadows that moved where shadows shouldn't. The path I'd taken before, marked by tire tracks and mud, was gone. Instead, twisted undergrowth blocked the way, branches curling like fingers. My heart thudded in my chest. I could feel the mill behind me, watching. Tap, tap. I thought I had been left behind, but the rhythm pulsed faintly, from somewhere just out of sight, echoing through the trees. I ran again, slipping in the mud. My jacket snagged on a branch, tearing at the sleeve. Tap, tap. I realized the sound wasn't coming from the mill alone. It was around me, beneath me, following me, even in open space. The clearing seemed smaller now, edges pressing in. I glanced behind. The mill wasn't just there, it had grown. Taller, darker, and the shadows crawling its walls now seemed to reach toward the ground, stretching outward, like the building itself had teeth. My breath came in shallow gasps. Tap, tap, I froze. A figure, or maybe several, shifted just beyond the tree line. Shadows then stretched, humanoid but wrong. They mirrored my movements, but they weren't me. I took a careful step back. They didn't react except to follow. Tap, drag. The subtle rhythm under my boots matched theirs. I turned, sprinted again, cutting through the brush. The air felt thick, heavy, like wading through water. Every step was measured against a pulse I could feel through the soles of my boots. Tap, tap, tap. Each one echoing a heartbeat not mine, in sync with some unseen presence. I glanced down at the mud. Footprints, my own, but some were elongated, misshapen, stretching into shapes that weren't human. I stumbled onto a hill, hoping for higher ground, a vantage point. From here, the mill was monstrous. Its roof sagged at impossible angles, shadows crawling along its sides. Tap, tap, and the whispering came again, clearer, almost teasing. Why do you run? I swallowed, tried to answer aloud, but my voice caught in my throat. The wind carried the sound in impossible ways, echoing from directions I couldn't locate. I moved down the other side of the hill, seeking the road I remembered, but the world had shifted. Muddy tracks twisted back on themselves. Trees I thought behind me were now ahead. The sky was the same gray, but the rain seemed slower, heavier, as though time itself had thickened. Tap, tap, drag, and with each step, the earth beneath me vibrated faintly, matching the pulse of the middle of the shadows, something alive and patient. I stumbled into a small clearing, trying to catch my breath. A broken fence marked the boundary, but the posts leaned inward, like fingers pointing. Tap, tap, I froze again. Something moved at the edge of my vision. A shadow, longer than it should be, stretched from the base of a tree, curling toward me. I swung the flashlight. Nothing solid, just a smear of darkness, as if the rain had painted it on. And yet, I could feel it watching, waiting, mirroring my panic. The path I thought I remembered, a gravel road leading away, was gone, replaced by thick grass that swallowed my boots. I realized, with a sickening twist, that the mill's influence had stretched far beyond its walls. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a presence, alive, learning, adapting. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm under my boots had changed, faster now, like a warning. I stopped, breathing hard, ears straining. Faint whispers drifted through the trees, teasing, curling around me. Faster, slower, why do you linger? The world felt alive, attentive, and every instinct screamed that it would punish hesitation. I ran again, the mud sucking at my boots, branches clawing at my jacket, rain blinding me. Tap, tap, drag, always following, always echoing. Then I saw something that made me stumble, almost fall. A patch of the clearing ahead had moved or shifted. The ground rose slightly, forming shapes like the mill's floorboards, warped, creaking alive. Tap, and the shapes pulsed. Shadows curled around them, reaching upward, twisting toward me. My stomach turned. The earth beneath me was no longer safe. Every step had to be measured, deliberate, or I'd join what I'd seen beneath the mill. I stumbled down a narrow path, hoping it led to the road. The trees leaned inward, branches forming arches, twisting into shapes that almost seemed human, almost whispered in voices I recognized, familiar, teasing, mocking. Tap, tap. The rhythm now came from all directions, not just underfoot. The shadows moved independently, curling around trunks, stretching toward me, but never quite touching. I realized they were studying me, learning from each misstep. The mill rose behind me through thinning rain, impossibly large now, its windows like eyes, dark and patient. Tap, tap, tap. A pulse that wasn't mine, a heartbeat I felt in my chest. I ran, not looking back, though I knew it watched, followed, waited for my foot to slip. My legs burned, lungs screamed, but the presence kept pace without moving. It was everywhere and nowhere, and I understood that escape would be measured in more than distance. A faint glimmer of the road appeared ahead, asphalt slick and black. I ran toward it, hope flaring. Tap, tap, drag, and something made me hesitate. The shadows at the edge of the clearing were thicker now, moving in unnatural ways, curling around the trees like smoke. Whispers grew louder. Closer, closer. My heartbeat synchronized with theirs. I realized I wasn't running from a place anymore. I was running from a mind. I reached the edge of the clearing and looked back once. The mill seemed impossibly distant, yet impossibly near. Its roof twisted like a spire, shadows crawling down the sides to meet the earth. Tap, tap, tap. I could feel the pulse even from here. The ground vibrated faintly. The shadows mirrored my movement. I swallowed hard, realizing this was no longer about leaving. It was about not being learned, not being mapped, not being folded into the mill's rhythm. I ran onto the road, asphalt slick, rain pelting. Tap, tap, drag. And for the first time, the sound seemed behind me. The mill receded into the night, but I could feel its gaze, stretching, probing, patient. The shadows had stopped moving for now, but I knew they would return. The road twisted, straightened, then bent in ways that didn't make sense. Trees leaned in again, whispering, and I realized the world had changed. Even outside, the mill's influence lingered. I kept moving, boots splashing, heart hammering. Every glance over my shoulder confirmed it. Shadows at the edge of my vision, mirrors of my panic, stretching, twisting, following. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm still pulsed in the earth, in the air, a constant heartbeat I could never outrun. I finally reached a familiar landmark, a mailbox, a fence, signs of human habitation. Relief surged. For a second, I thought I was safe. Tap, tap, faint beneath the road. I froze. Even here, even now, the pulse whispered through the ground. The mill was patient, watching, waiting. It had learned, adapted, and its reach was longer than I could imagine. I took a deep breath, forcing my legs to move. One step, then another. Tap, tap, drag, and I realized fully that fleeing the mill wasn't about distance. It was about staying alive in a world that now bent to its will, a rhythm I could never fully anticipate. The shadows lingered at the edge of my vision, and the whisper threaded through the trees. You cannot leave, not really. I ran, not daring to slow. The rain soaked me, mud clung to my boots, but the pulse followed. The presence followed. Every step a calculation, every breath a choice. I knew the mill was alive, and it had claimed a part of me already. Tap, 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 and somewhere beneath, between the trees, beneath the earth, the rhythm continued. Always, waiting for the next misstep. The call came in just after midnight. Strange noises in the underpass. My first thought was drunk kids or someone moving through the water for fun. But something in the dispatcher's voice made my stomach tighten. A hesitation I couldn't ignore. I drove through the wet streets, headlights slicing through mist, tires splashing shallow puddles. The city felt heavier than usual, damp and quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I reached the underpass. The concrete walls slicked with rain runoff. Water pooled across the roadway, reflecting everything with an unnatural shimmer. I stepped out, boots splashing into the icy water. At first, nothing moved, just a faint echo of dripping, distant traffic humming above. Then I saw it, or thought I did. A shape flickered in the reflection. Just a ripple at first, like a shadow moving beneath the water's surface. I crouched, flashlight sweeping, and the image dissolved. My pulse picked up. I told myself it was just a trick of light, a trick of my eyes, but that whisper of movement kept returning. I followed the edge of the water, careful not to make too much noise. Every step made a soft sucking sound against the mud and water. I noticed the reflections weren't just bouncing back to streetlights. They were stretching, twisting, angles that didn't belong. Lines that should have been straight bent into impossible shapes. I froze, heart hammering, tried to convince myself that it was just reflection. Tap, a ripple across the water, small, deliberate. I held my breath. A sound came next, low, wet and melodic, like water being stirred by something large moving beneath. I thought of a rat, then discarded it. This was too heavy, too deliberate. A pause. Tap, tap, then a faint hiss. Curling up the walls, echoing in ways concrete shouldn't allow. I swung the flashlight again. Nothing but water, dark and oily in the beam. Yet I could feel it watching. Something down there, moving just under the surface. Tracking me. I moved forward slowly, flashlight grazing the water. Shapes began to emerge. Fleeting, impossible. A human arm? A face pressed just under the water? I blinked and it was gone. A reflection, but not mine. Something mirrored me, distorted. My chest tightened. Tap, tap, beneath the water, a rhythm that matched my heartbeat too closely to be coincidence. The echoes shifted, bouncing off the walls at impossible angles. A sound like laughter, muffled and wet, rolled through the underpass. My stomach turned, legs tense, every instinct screaming to leave. But curiosity rooted me. The water glimmered again, and I saw it clearly this time. A figure, or the hint of one, tall and thin, kneeling just beneath the surface. Its head tilted unnaturally, like it was studying me, waiting. Tap! A foot slipped in the mud, and I froze, heart racing. I took another step, flashlight shaking in my hand. The figure vanished, swallowed by ripples, but the reflections remained wrong. Shapes that should have been my own arms stretched sideways, bending in ways that made no sense. I shivered. Every instinct told me this was more than just water, more than shadows. Tap, tap, and a faint whisper curling from the far end of the tunnel. You shouldn't be here. The voice, or thought, I couldn't tell, made me jump. I swung the light down the tunnel. No one. The water mirrored the world, yes, but also something else. Shapes moved beneath, shifting, almost breathing. A fleeting pattern caught my eye. Something large, crawling just beneath the surface. I blinked. Nothing. But the fear remained, rooted, coiling in my chest. I moved closer to the center, flashlight sweeping. The air smelled of wet concrete and something darker, something organic. The ripples in the water grew, spreading in arcs, though no wind touched the surface. Tap, tap, and the water seemed to pulse with intention. I stopped, trying to make sense of it. Why here? Why now? Every rational thought dissolved under the weight of sensation, under the feeling that the water itself had noticed me. The reflections moved again, faster this time, but subtly, shadows bent upward where the ceiling should have stayed flat. Shapes emerged, fleeting, human-like but wrong. Long limbs, twisted faces that pressed against the water like they were trapped between surfaces. I blinked and they dissolved. Tap, tap. The rhythm now echoed my own pulse. My flashlight flickered. I swallowed hard, wet breath curling in the cold air. I edged closer to the deepest part, where water pooled in dark hollows. My reflection twisted independently of me. My legs bent wrong, my arms stretched long and thin. A muffled gurgle came from beneath the surface. Something moved against the current, slow, deliberate. I froze, trying to convince myself it was just water moving over debris. But the shapes, the ripples, they responded to me. Tap, tap, a whisper. Closer. I stepped back, boots slipping, water splashing over the edge. My reflection twisted again, head turning where mine did not. Shapes emerged beneath the surface. Faces pressed against the water from below. They were pale, blurry, staring. Mouths open, teeth barely visible, eyes dark. I stumbled backward. Tap, tap, the water around me pulsed. The faces vanished, leaving ripples that lingered unnaturally long, almost clinging to the surface like smoke. I forced myself to move, shivering, toward the light at the tunnel's mouth. The water mirrored reality again, but then flickered. Another face, fleeting, thin, pressed against the concrete walls under the surface, eyes tracking me. I blinked. Gone. Tap, tap, and the whisper followed. Why leave? My pulse matched the rhythm, thrumming against my chest, hypnotic and mocking. I glanced behind me. The underpass seemed longer, darker. Water pooled in shapes that bent reality. Ripples ran against the current. Shadows moved independently of light, twisting the reflections. Tap, tap, and a faint cold touch grazed my shoulder, though nothing was there. I spun. Empty tunnel. Water still. Just reflections, warped and teasing. I moved faster, trying to reach the dry end, the open air. Tap, tap, the rhythm quickened. The water at the edges bubbled, as if something large moved beneath. I stumbled, flashlight clanging against concrete, boots sliding. The reflections stretched up the walls, bending into shapes that were human but wrong. Faces pressed against angles they shouldn't occupy. Whispered voices tangled in the tunnel, unrecognizable but urgent. I reached the end, stepping onto dry asphalt. The air outside smelled of rain and asphalt, normal. But my chest heaved, lungs burning. Tap, tap, faint beneath my boots, almost imperceptible. I froze. The underpass behind me remained dark, quiet. But I knew it wasn't empty. Not really. Water reflected reality, but also memory, desire, intent. Something had followed me in here, or at least studied me. Tap, tap, the rhythm lingered. I glanced back once more. The tunnel was silent. No faces, no whispers, only water reflecting the dull streetlights. I forced my legs to move, stepping onto the wet sidewalk, boots squelching. Tap, tap, beneath the surface, faint, irregular. The city hummed above, but the underpass waited, patient, watching. And I knew I hadn't left. Not truly. I kept walking, tried to convince myself the shapes were just reflections, the whispers figments. But the rhythm remained in my chest, sinking to my pulse, a reminder that the underpass had noticed me, that the water remembered. Tap, tap, and somewhere just below the surface, shapes waited patient, and the shadows began to stretch again. I stepped back into the underpass, the streetlight at the entrance barely reaching the water. Every splash of my boots echoed against the damp concrete, like a warning. The first time I'd looked into the puddles, I'd seen only strange ripples, but now the reflections had changed. Faces stared back at me. Not mine, not anyone I recognized. Blurred, twisted, mouths open as if they wanted to speak, but no sound came. I crouched, letting the water lap at my boots, flashlight trembling in my hands. The reflections shifted, breathing under the surface. Whispers curled up the walls, wet and urgent, like water rushing through pipes, but forming words just beyond comprehension. I leaned closer. Tap, tap, a ripple spread outward, concentric rings, as if something beneath the surface was testing me. I swallowed hard, chest tightening. My shadow stretched behind me, but so did the others, long, thin, impossible. The air smelled like wet concrete, but a faint metallic tang clung to it. I inhaled sharply. A flicker in the water caught my eye. A face, pale, its eyes black, pressed against the surface as if trying to escape from below. I blinked, and it was gone. My pulse hammered. Tap, tap, and the whisper came again. Closer, I jerked upright, flashlight scanning the dark corners. Nothing, but I could feel it. The eyes beneath the water, watching, waiting. I moved forward slowly, boots sliding in mud and shallow water. Each step made a soft squelching noise, and the reflections reacted, twisting unnaturally. Shapes emerged, elongated limbs, faces pressed against angles that made no sense. Tap, tap, the rhythm quickened, matching the beat in my chest. My light caught another reflection, then another. Each time I blinked, it vanished, but left ripples that lingered too long, like a memory of movement. The whispers intensified, curling around the pillars of the underpass. I tried to focus on one, but they overlapped, rising and falling like waves. Tap, tap, a shiver ran down my spine. One reflection solidified, hovering just below the surface. Its eyes met mine. I stumbled backward, flashlight swinging. Tap, tap, the sound under my boots, faint, deliberate. Something moved beneath the water, slow, patient, tracking me. I froze. The water's surface shimmered, revealing a series of faces pressed close together, layered, overlapping, as if the water had stored them, each one screaming silently. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and the reflections twisted again, elongating into shapes I couldn't name. Tap, tap, a whisper snaked through the tunnel. Do you see us? I stumbled toward the entrance, but the water pulled me back. The puddles glimmered with shapes, faces pressing from beneath, rising, sinking, always watching. Tap, tap. I realized the reflections weren't just distorted. They were alive, reacting to me. I swung my flashlight, trying to break the rhythm, try to assert control. The faces recoiled and pressed closer, eyes black, mouths open in silent protest. The whispers wrapped around my ears, insistent, teasing, "You shouldn't leave." I backed further, boots slipping in the muck. The water glimmered again, revealing one face more solid than the others. Pale, thin, staring. A hand pressed up against the water, reaching. Tap, tap. My heartbeat matched it, and I could feel it, the water pulsing beneath me, testing, teasing. I stumbled, flashlight swinging wildly, and caught another reflection in the corner. A group, crouched, watching. Their movements mirrored mine, but wrong, jerky, unnatural. I swallowed hard, panic rising. Tap, tap. The whispers grew louder, sharper, curling into words I almost understood. Don't go. I forced myself to breathe, telling myself it was just water, just reflection. But every fiber of my being screamed otherwise. The water pulsed underfoot. Something large moved beneath the surface. Something patient, deliberate. Tap, tap. A shadow crossed my reflection, stretching across the puddles. I turned quickly. Empty water, but the shadows lingered. I edged toward the dry pavement, heart pounding. The reflections shifted again, forming faces that weren't human. Elongated mouths, hollow eyes, expressions impossible. Tap, tap, a whisper, curling in my ear. Closer. I jerked upright, scanning the tunnel. The water rippled, and a hand, thin, pale, pressed against the surface, vanished as I blinked. My pulse rattled in my ears. I moved faster, splashing through the shallow water. Try to reach the light at the entrance. Tap, tap. The rhythm quickened, echoing against the walls, against my chest. Another reflection appeared, crouched low, watching, its head tilted, eyes following, mouth opening and closing silently. Tap, tap, and I felt a cold brush against my arm, fleeting, almost teasing. I spun. Nothing, but the water pulsed, and the shadows writhed beneath. The whispers rose again, overlapping, forming words I could almost make sense of. Why leave? Why leave? My pulse raced. The reflections twisted violently, long limbs stretching, faces contorting. Tap, tap, a figure emerged beneath the surface, tall, thin, staring. I froze, watching it move just under the water, reacting to my every step. My flashlight caught the edge of its face, white and blank, before it dissolved into ripples. I stumbled toward the exit, boots splashing, water sloshing around my legs. Tap, tap. The rhythm followed me, persistent, relentless. The reflections bent unnaturally, stretching along the walls, reaching for me. Whispered voices overlapped. Closer, stay, stay. I reached the dry edge, chest heaving, and the underpass fell silent. For a moment, normal. For a heartbeat, the city outside seemed real. I looked back once. The water shimmered, reflections gone. Shadows retreated, the whispers faded. But tap, tap. Beneath my boots, faint, deliberate waiting, I forced myself to keep walking. My pulse began to slow, but the memory of faces, pressed and watching, lingered. The water had noticed me, stored me, and I knew it wouldn't let me forget. Even outside, under the streetlights, I felt its presence. Tap, tap, faint, irregular, like heartbeat echoes carried from below. I glanced at the underpass, dark and silent, but aware, and in the reflection of a puddle by the curb, a face blinked, vanishing before I could be sure I saw it. I stepped back into the underpass, boots sinking slightly into the shallow water, and the streetlight behind me flickered once, as if protesting. The tunnel stretched ahead, dark and wet, but something felt wrong. Longer than it should be, wider. Shadows curled around the arches like living smoke. The water at my feet shifted with each step, rippling in ways that didn't match my movement. Then I felt it, a tug, light, subtle at first, like the water brushing against my boot, then stronger, insistent, pulling me forward. I froze, chest tightening. My flashlight quivered in my hands, illuminating nothing but dark water, reflecting strange, unsteady patterns. Tap, tap, faint, deliberate, as if some rhythm pulsed beneath the surface. I stepped back, boots sliding in mud, but the tug followed, unrelenting. I crouched, testing the water with a gloved hand. Cold, thick, almost solid, and then something slipped over my fingers. Something small, slippery, moving against me. I yanked my hand back, hard hammering, and the water calmed instantly, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something was there, waiting. The reflections in the water shifted. Faces, stretched and pale, blinked in and out of existence. Eyes following, mouths opening just long enough for silence to crawl in. I leaned closer, flashlight cutting a line of pale light through the tunnel. Tap, tap, whispering. Not from above, not from the walls. From below, under the water. Come closer. The words wrapped around me like fog. I moved forward, boots splashing, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. Every puddle became a mirror, every shadow a presence. The tunnel extended, stretching farther than it should, walls curving subtly as if bending reality itself. Tap, tap, a pulse underfoot, then the tug again. Stronger now, insistent, pulling me down, urging me forward into the black. I scanned the surface of the water, flashlight catching glimpses of movement beneath. Limbs, pale and thin, reaching, retreating, following, ripples layered over ripples, as if the water remembered every step I'd taken. Tap, tap, the rhythm quickened, echoing in my ears, matching my own heartbeat. I stumbled, splashing into a deeper pool. Cold water licked my knees. My light caught another face, solid this time, pressed up from beneath, staring with hollow, black eyes. I jerked back, but the tug didn't relent. I forced myself to breathe. The tunnel curved again. The light from the street above barely penetrated the darkness, leaving the underpass an endless corridor of black water and whispering shadows. Tap, tap, the water pulsed underfoot. Something moved, faster now, slipping between reflections, circling me. I could feel it brushing against my boots, searching, playful, patient. I tried to take another step. My boots sank deeper than expected, into a gap in the concrete floor, or what had once been floor. Something shifted beneath me. Tentatively, I tested it with my weight. A lurching pull, like fingers wrapping around my ankle, almost gentle but unyielding. I yanked free, hard in my throat. The water smoothed instantly, hiding whatever it was. Tap, tap, the whispers pressed against my ears. Why leave? Stay. I scrambled forward, boots sloshing, flashlight swinging. Ripples moved in impossible directions. Shadows detaching from the walls and crawling along the water. Faces appeared and disappeared, staring, twisted in expressions I couldn't name. Tap, tap. I realized the reflections weren't random. They reacted. They anticipated. They were alive. I reached a stretch where the water deepened past my knees. Something beneath me brushed against my shin. I froze. Tap, tap, pulse underfoot. I kicked backward. A faint shriek, or was it just my imagination? Echoed through the tunnel. The water shimmered, revealing a figure beneath the surface. Thin, white and watching, its head tilted, eyes following, disappearing as I blinked. The tug returned, stronger, more deliberate. My boot slipped. I sank further. A hand, pale, wet, brushed my ankle, curling around. Tap, tap, my pulse quickened, matching the rhythm underfoot. I kicked violently, splashing water into the air, and stumbled forward, grabbing the wall. Concrete, wet, cold, but solid. The tug didn't relent. Something beneath the surface was patient, waiting for me to slip again. I glanced back. The tunnel stretched impossibly, fading into darkness, walls curving subtly inward as if to contain me. Faces pressed against the water, mouths opening, teeth glinting, eyes black. Tap, tap. The whispers rose, overlapping, forming a chorus. Closer, don't leave, stay with us. I forced myself to move faster. Each step a struggle through the sucking, writhing water. Ripples carried distorted images of my own reflection. Twisted, elongated, like the tunnel had memorized me. Tap, tap, and I realized the rhythm beneath me wasn't random. It followed me, grew with me, mirrored my fear, matched my heartbeat. I swallowed hard, trying to regain control. Then, just ahead, the tunnel seemed to bend differently. My flashlight caught a shimmer beneath the surface. A figure emerged, thin, long-limbed, its eyes fixed on mine. Tap, tap, a gentle tug at my ankle, then gone. The water calmed, leaving me trembling, but the reflections lingered, hovering just beneath the surface, layered faces pressing, watching, breathing. I stumbled, moving faster, desperate to find the exit. Tap, tap. The rhythm accelerated, echoing in the walls, echoing in my chest. Faces warped, elongated, some screaming silently, some laughing with no sound. Whispers twisted into words I could almost understand. Why leave? You belong here. I stumbled again, water sloshing over my knees, and the tunnel curved further, longer than it should, darker than it had any right to be. I tried to ignore the tug, tried to focus on the faint light at the entrance behind me, but the pull grew, fingers gripping, water swirling around my legs. Tap, tap, a hand surfaced briefly, pale, clawing, before vanishing again. I swung my flashlight, catching glimpses of movement beneath. Shadows weaving between ripples, reaching. I pressed onward, heart hammering, lungs tight. The water grew deeper, sucking at my boots, tugging, pulsing, alive. Tap, tap, whispers overlapped. Closer stay belong. Faces pressed upward from the water, some solid, some flickering, black eyes fixed, impossible angles. I blinked, and they shifted, reacting, anticipating my next step. Finally, I saw the faint glow of the streetlight ahead, shimmering through the water. Tap, tap, the tug persisted, insistent. I kicked forward, water splashing violently, heart racing, faces twisted, warped, elongated. The whispers crescendoed, layered, echoing in the tunnel. Tap, tap, and I realized, whatever lived beneath this water, whatever bent the tunnel, it wasn't just following, it was learning, adapting, waiting for me to slip. I lunged toward the glow, chest burning, boots sliding in the muck. Tap, tap. The rhythm accelerated faster than my heartbeat. The reflections beneath me convulsed. Ripples carrying faces, hands, limbs reaching upward. I stumbled, nearly losing balance, but slammed into dry pavement. The water calmed instantly. The tug ceased. Silence. I crouched, gasping, flashlight shaking. The underpass stretched behind me, impossibly dark, impossibly long, alive. Tap, tap, faint, almost imperceptible, like a heartbeat from beneath. I dared glance back. The water shimmered, reflections layered, faces pressed to the surface, watching. One pale hand broke through, then vanished before I could react. I stumbled away, gasping for air, trying to convince myself it was over, but the tunnel lingered in my mind. Tap, tap, the rhythm followed me, faint, distant, a memory echoing in my chest. Faces pressed in every reflection I passed. Store windows, puddles, even the shiny hood of my patrol car. I tried to shake it, tell myself it was just imagination, but the tug, the water would not forget me, and neither would the faces. Even now, standing outside dry, streetlights normal, the rhythm persists. Tap, tap, beneath the echoes of my thoughts. Every puddle reflects something different, and sometimes I swear if I look too long, I see movement beneath the surface, waiting, patient, always waiting. The forest had a rhythm that night, but it wasn't natural. Tires crunching over gravel. I slowed the patrol truck, squinting into the dark edges of the trees. A low wind rustled leaves, but the sounds weren't just leaves. Something deeper, older. I caught movement, a flicker in the tree lean. A deer, too still, too deliberate. My stomach tightened. Then came the first call. An owl, sharp, high-pitched. But it wasn't just a call. It was a sequence, deliberate, echoing from tree to tree. Another followed immediately, from a completely different part of the forest, almost like an answer. I frowned. Owls didn't coordinate like that. Not here. Not now. Headlights cut into the shadows. Branches scraped the roof of the truck. The air smelled damp and metallic, like the ground itself had been soaked in something long forgotten. I rolled down my window. The sound of wolves joined the owls, low and deliberate. A chorus with an impossible precision. One howl, two responses, then silence. Then an answering howl from the far side of the hill. It wasn't a pack hunting. It was a conversation. Plan. I gripped the wheel tighter. My radio squawked and I froze. No one else should be on the channel. Static, then a faint growl, unmistakably animal, but stretched, warped. Like a predator had learned to mimic the signal. I spun the dial. Nothing. The growl lingered in my chest. Something in the forest had learned my heartbeat. I stepped out, boots crunching on wet leaves, flashlight cutting a thin beam. Every step echoed, but there were other echoes too. Tap, tap, not my own, but in rhythm with my movements. Wolves emerged along the tree line, eyes glinting in the light. But they didn't approach. They circled, watching, coordinating. Tap, tap. Each step a pulse beneath my skin. A screeching call from an owl above made me freeze. Its head twisted at an impossible angle, staring straight at me, eyes wide, intelligent. Then another owl responded from the east, perching on a branch that shouldn't hold it, balanced impossibly. I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Another shadow, darker than the night, slipping silently between the trunks. The wolves flinched, frozen, then moved as one. I realized they were waiting for something or someone. I tried to speak into my radio. Control, you copy? My own voice sounded wrong. Hollow, only static returned. Then a low rumble, like earth itself vibrating. The ground beneath my boots shifted slightly, subtle, but enough to throw me off balance. Tap, tap. The wolves paused at the ground in sync. The forest itself seemed alive. Waiting. Testing. I lifted the flashlight, scanning tree trunks, branches, shadows. The movement was everywhere and nowhere. One moment a wolf to the left, then gone. A deer-like figure emerged in the distance, tall, skeletal, then dissolved into the mist. I swallowed hard. My pulse raced. Every instinct screamed, leave, and then the chorus started. Every animal, owls, wolves, even the rustle of something I couldn't identify, joined the rhythm. High-pitched, low, overlapping, precise. My ears rang. I stepped back. The beam of my flashlight caught a wolf staring straight into my eyes. Pupils too large, reflecting not just light, but something else, something I couldn't name. Tap, tap, my heartbeat. Tap, tap, there's one. Rhythm, shared. I stumbled backward. The forest shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Trees closer, branches lower. My truck seemed farther away. The chorus didn't stop. It layered, responded, anticipated. I realized they weren't just communicating. They were orchestrating, waiting for me to make a mistake. Tap, tap, a rhythm I couldn't control. A sudden rustle. Something large moved through the undergrowth. Fast, silent, intelligent. Wolves parted like curtains, creating a path, a channel of observation. The owl's calls became sharper, deliberate. My flashlight caught one in mid-flight. Its wings too wide, feathers too dark, eyes too knowing. Another answered from the far side. The forest was alive with intention. I backed toward my truck, hands shaking. Tap, tap, the rhythm quickened, matching my fear. The ground beneath my boots seemed to pulse, responding to me. The forest had noticed me. It was calculating, testing. The shadows lengthened unnaturally. Branches reached out with wet, claw-like fingers, brushing my jacket. I reached the truck, slammed the door, locking it. Engine turned over. Headlights cut through the darkness. Wolves and owls froze, observing, then retreated, melting into the shadows with deliberate grace. Tap, tap, I breathed, chest heaving. But the rhythm lingered, faint, buried in the echo of leaves, in the vibrations under the tires, in the pulse at the base of my skull. I drove slowly, scanning side to side. Every tree, every shadow seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. The forest whispered. Tap, tap, the owls called in patterns, answering unseen signals. Wolves padded silently alongside, just at the edge of vision, never crossing the line, never showing teeth. But I knew they understood me, and I did not understand them. At the next curve, the mist thickened, curling around headlights. I caught movement again, tall, skeletal, impossible. Tap, tap, it mirrored my heartbeat. A wolf stepped out, perfectly aligned with my pace. Staring, waiting, the rhythm of the forest, of the animals, was a chain I could not break. I tried to tell myself it was instinct, coordination, natural behavior. But it wasn't. Not natural. Tap, tap. The forest knew me, anticipated my steps, and maybe it liked me. Or it was studying me. My own shadow fell differently in the headlights, elongating, twisting, mimicking the shapes of branches, leaves, and wolves alike. Tap, tap. I felt it in my chest. Then the call changed. A single owl, perched high above, let out a long, deliberate note. Tap, tap, followed by silence. Every animal stopped, even the wind. The forest held its breath, and in that pause, I realized a subtle shift. The path I had taken now looked unfamiliar. The curves, the trees, even the gravel road, they had changed. Or I had. I gripped the wheel. Eyes darted to every shadow. Tap, tap, faint, almost internal now. A pulsing sync of my heartbeat. A distant howl answered it. I glanced up. Owls and wolves had vanished, or were hiding, waiting. The forest exhaled. The rhythm slowed. Tap, tap, but it didn't stop. Not really. It lingered, a memory, a warning, a heartbeat I could not shake. The patrol truck carried me onward, but the forest remained. Tap, tap. The call of animals, now faint, echoed in my mind. Every reflection in my mirrors caught movement, impossible angles, eyes glinting. I realized something I didn't want to admit. This forest, these creatures, were aware. They watched, and maybe, just maybe, they remembered me. Even now, the memory of that night presses against my chest. Tap, tap, a rhythm beneath the skin, a pulse beneath the world, a forest alive with intention. The animals had been calling, and I had answered. The fog rolled in faster than anything I've ever seen, thick and alive, curling through the trees like smoke from some ancient fire. Headlights barely cut through it. The forest dissolving into a white blur. Every tree became a phantom, every shadow a question. I slowed the truck, every muscle taut, listening. The usual night sounds, the wind, the leaves, the distant calls of animals, vanished, swallowed by the mist. I stepped out, boots crunching softly on wet leaves. The fog was cold, clinging, seeping into my clothes, my skin, my chest. Tap, tap, my heartbeat. I felt it echo in the distance, though nothing should be there. And yet, movement flickered just beyond my sight. A shadow, a shift in the mist that vanished when I looked directly at it. I swallowed hard. My instinct screamed, follow it or don't. I had no choice. The forest stretched endlessly, or so it seemed. Every turn, every step forward felt like walking into the same patch of trees I had already passed. The fog wrapped around me, thickening until even the truck's lights seemed like dim lanterns behind a veil. I thought I saw a branch twitch, but the mist had twisted it into something alive. A shape slithered between the trunks. Too smooth, too deliberate. My pulse spiked. I called out, voice echoing oddly in the fog. Hello? The words sounded wrong, stretched, distorted. No response, not even the wind. Just silence, then a faint movement. Tap, tap again. A rhythm beneath the mist, matching my steps, keeping pace, watching. I stopped. The rhythm paused, then continued, but offset, like it was teasing me, marking territory I didn't understand. I swung my flashlight. Its beam caught a figure, or what I thought was a figure, tall, hunched, moving with impossible grace. Another flicker, and it was gone. I blinked. The mist shifted, folding over itself, creating new paths, new alleys between the trees. Every glance revealed a new shadow. Every shadow dissolved when I focused. The forest wasn't just alive, it was aware. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth. My flashlight swung to the noise. Nothing, just fog curling, twisting, teasing. I took a step forward. Something low, fast, passed through my peripheral vision. Tap, tap. I froze, breath shallow. The rhythm echoed in my chest. It was close, too close. The fog thickened around my legs, wrapping like hands, soft but pressing. I forced myself to keep moving. The mist seemed to stretch the forest infinitely. Every familiar landmark vanished. The truck, the road, the path. I couldn't tell which direction led back. The air smelled wet, earthy, like the ground had exhaled something long buried. And always tap, tap, beneath the sound of my own heartbeat. Something else echoing, following, learning. Another flicker in the mist. A figure, taller this time. Pale, smooth, a silhouette that shouldn't have been that way. I swung the flashlight, but it vanished, leaving only curling fog and trees that seemed farther apart than before. I felt eyes everywhere and nowhere. The mist shifted around me, moving in patterns I couldn't predict. A branch snapped behind me. I spun. Nothing. I whispered into the fog, my own voice foreign. "Who's there?" The fog answered, not in words, but in movement. Shapes drifted low and fast between the trees, retreating just as I approached. Tap, tap, always keeping rhythm. I realized with sinking feeling. I wasn't a hunter. I was the hunted. Or maybe the forest was playing a game it had been rehearsing for centuries. A sudden break in the trees. Mist clearing just enough to see a deer, standing unnaturally still. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the light in a way that made them look human. I blinked. When my eyes refocused, it was gone. Tap, tap, the rhythm quickened. I stumbled backward. My pulse raced. The forest had learned my pace, my fear, my hesitation. Every step I took, it mirrored, extended, distorted. I turned, thinking I saw the truck. Headlights dim, flickering. Relief hit me for a second, brief and shallow. But the fog shifted. Where the truck had been was only trees, endless trees, stretching into nothing. I swallowed, heart pounding. Tap, tap, faster now, mocking. The forest had trapped me, or I had walked into something that wasn't meant to be walked into. Movement flickered again, a tall, thin figure slipping between the trunks. I froze. It was too fast, too fluid. I raised the flashlight. Nothing. Then a whisper, soft, wet, hissing. Not human, not any animal I knew. "Go," it seemed to say. Tap, tap, the rhythm matching the whisper, synchronizing with my heartbeat. I realized I couldn't distinguish where I ended and the forest began. Branches reached out, brushing my shoulders. Not wind, not gravity, but deliberate testing. I stepped back. Tap, tap. I jumped, mist twisted, forming shapes that weren't quite solid. Faces fleeting, dissolving before I could name them. Pale mouths, wide and empty, staring with unblinking eyes. I spun the flashlight around. Gone. Only fog, only rhythm. The undergrowth shifted. I caught glimpses, legs, limbs too long, too thin, moving against the logic of nature. Tap, tap, it was everywhere now, not just beneath my feet, but in my ears, my chest, in the fog itself. A sudden screech from an owl above. Another answered from across the fog. Then wolves, far off, howling in deliberate patterns, overlapping with the owl calls. My mind reeled. This was a symphony, a trap, a warning. I stumbled forward, trying to find the path, the truck, anything familiar. Every step revealed new illusions. Trees twisted into impossible angles. Roots rose like veins. Tap, tap, it followed. The forest laughed in silence. A pressure on my skin, a tug on my thoughts. The fog wasn't just mist anymore. It was intelligence, intent, patience. I slowed, held the flashlight low. Shapes flickered around me, fleeting, whispering in movements I could barely process. One form lingered longer, pale and tall, just at the edge of the beam. Tap, tap. I froze. The figure bent closer, tilting its head unnaturally. I could feel it inside my mind, measuring, probing. Then it vanished, leaving only the whisper of leaves, the lingering rhythm, the fog curling like smoke, endless, alive. My breaths came shallow, rapid. I realized I didn't know which direction I had come from. The forest had erased everything familiar. Tap, tap, the rhythm echoed in every step, every heartbeat, every shadow. I understood too late that the forest had no edge, no exit, only paths it allowed, shapes it dictated, and rhythms it controlled. A sudden clearing, a pond I hadn't seen before, water dark, still, reflecting nothing but fog, movement under the surface. Tap, tap, quickening. I saw shapes, thin, elongated, curling in the water, moving toward me, faces barely formed, staring through the liquid mirror. I stumbled backward. Branches lashed my face. Mist swallowed me. Tap, tap, relentless. I turned in panic, searching for the truck, the path, any solid landmark. Nothing. Mist and trees stretched endlessly, shifting, bending, alive. My pulse screamed in my ears. The rhythm was mine, yet not mine. Something else walked in sync. Something patient. Something infinite. Tap, tap. I ran, feet slipping, branches clawing, fog folding around me like hands, dragging me towards something I didn't want to see. And then a single owl call, sharp, deliberate, above the rest. Silence fell after it. Tap, tap, slow but didn't stop. Shapes retreated, hiding in the fog, but their presence lingered. The forest had tested me, followed me, learned me. My mind raced, breath caught in my throat. I realized with a sinking certainty I had survived the first layer. The fog had released me, but only to continue its game, only to make me question which way was real, which shape I could trust, which rhythm belonged to me. I stepped carefully, watching shadows, listening to echoes, heartbeat and rhythm entwined. Every instinct screamed to flee, but where? The mist stretched on endlessly, infinite, alive, patient. Tap, tap, beneath every step. I had no answers, only questions, only movement, only shapes that vanished, only the fog curling like smoke and teeth, endless, watching, waiting. I slowed the truck, staring at the mud-slicked road ahead. Something didn't sit right. Tire tracks etched into the soil, deep and fresh, stretched before me. But the further I looked, the more they changed. One moment, a single set, the next doubled, tripled, then gone. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe the rain had washed parts away. But no, the patterns weren't random. They were deliberate, teasing. I stepped out. The mud sucked at my boots, thick, sticky, cold. The air smelled damp, rotten, like wet leaves left to rot in silence. I followed the tracks with my flashlight, its beam cutting a narrow path. Each step felt heavier than the last. Tap, tap, the rhythm of something moving beneath my attention, just beyond the glow. The tracks led me past trees twisted with age, gnarled branches arching like fingers. Shadows flickered between them. My mind or something else, I couldn't tell. I stopped, blinked. The tracks behind me had shifted. My own boots had left prints that weren't there a second ago. I swallowed hard. The forest seemed to lean in, watching, waiting. I bent to inspect one of the prints. Not human. Too deep, too wide. Edges curling unnaturally. Something heavy had pressed here. Something alive. The mud oozed around it like it wanted to hold the mark, then vanish it entirely. I looked up. Nothing moved. Only trees. Only fog curling in low waves. Only the rhythmic tapping of some unseen presence. I took a careful step forward. The tracks multiplied, spiraling around me. Some heading forward, some backward, none making sense. My flashlight caught movement. A flash, too quick for my eyes to follow. Tap, tap, heartbeat and rhythm entwined. I tried to shake it off. Maybe exhaustion, maybe my brain playing tricks. But then a branch snapped behind me. Not wind, something deliberate. I spun, empty, only mud, only tracks that weren't tracks anymore. I followed a single line, hoping for some clarity. It led to a puddle, shallow, black. The reflection wasn't mine alone. Shapes slithered beneath the water, twisting, distorting. A figure crouched in the depth, pale, limbs long, head tilting unnaturally. I stepped back. Tap, tap, the rhythm quickened. The reflection didn't match me. My shadow stretched long in the puddle, moving independently, curling toward the forest. I looked down the road again. The tracks gone, replaced by deep gouges, each angled as if something had turned sharply, vanishing into fog. My truck, far behind, looked smaller, unreal. A faint whisper brushed my ears. Not words, just a sibilant sound, teasing. Tap, tap, the rhythm now all around beneath my feet, within my chest. I pressed on. Every step revealed new anomalies. tree roots, half submerged in mud, bent like ropes, as if something had crawled beneath them. Leaves swirled in patterns that weren't wind-made. The air grew heavier. Breathing became effortful. I felt watched, measured, and judged. Tap, tap, a heartbeat not entirely mine. A sudden break in the fog. Another set of tracks. I froze. They weren't my own. Wider, deeper, dragging something across the soil. I followed. Each step distorted reality more. Shadows shifted oddly. My flashlight flickered. Shapes danced in peripheral vision. Long limbs thin, twisting, vanishing when I looked directly. Tap, tap, closer now, almost mocking. Mud splashed around my boots as I ran. The tracks multiplied, vanishing, reappearing, playing a game I couldn't understand. I stumbled into a clearing. A vehicle, old, rusted, abandoned, sat half buried in mud. Tracks led straight into it, then vanished entirely. The forest was silent. Too silent. My pulse roared. Tap, tap, the rhythm had stopped. Or maybe I just realized I hadn't been listening to my own heartbeat for a while. I circled the truck, flashlight sweeping. Windows opaque with grime. Interior dark. Something shifted inside. I froze. Tap, tap, faint. Not footsteps. Movement beneath the mud. Something alive, waiting. I reached for the door. Cold metal, slick with rain. I pulled. Locked. Not surprising. But then, footprints, leading away from the truck, fading into fog. They weren't human. Not entirely. The forest seemed to breathe, mist curling, thickening, swallowing landmarks, creating new ones. The road behind me, gone. Ahead, indeterminate. Tap, tap. Heartbeat syncopated with something else. I tried calling out. My voice seemed muffled, distant, as if the fog itself absorbed sound. No reply, only rhythm, only shadows that didn't belong. Another set of tracks appeared near my feet. Wide, circular, almost deliberate in design. They swirled around me, converging, then disappeared. I jumped back. Mud splashed, cold, wet. Tap, tap, everywhere. Shapes flickered in the fog, pale, long, crouching low, observing. The air smelled damp and metallic. My stomach turned. I stumbled forward, desperate to find anything solid. Each step distorted the forest further. Roots bent unnaturally. Trees leaned closer, branches clawing. Fog twisted in loops. Tracks my own? Not my own. Appeared, vanished, appeared again. Tap, tap, relentless. I could no longer tell if the rhythm came from the forest, the tracks, or me. I stopped at another puddle. Reflection, not mine. Faces distorted, peering up at me. Pale, unblinking. Tap, tap faster now. Shapes rose slightly, barely forming. Limbs extended. One figure lingered longer, tilting its head, watching. Then it melted into fog. My pulse screamed, breathing ragged. I realized this was a trap, a game I hadn't agreed to play. I turned to run, but the road, gone. Tracks everywhere, nowhere. A flash of movement in the mist. Taller, slower, deliberate. Tap, tap. The rhythm now matched my steps exactly, mocking. Every stride felt mirrored. Every glance met a shape that wasn't real. Or maybe was too real. Trees twisted further, mud deepened, fog thickened. I swallowed hard, trying to ground myself. I tried to follow a single track, hoping it led out. It curved, twisted, became multiple paths, then vanished entirely. Tap, tap persistent. I ran blindly. Roots caught my boots. Mud clung. Shadows flickered. A whisper, faint, teasing, brushed my ear. Not words, just sound. Tap, tap, heartbeat syncopated. I realized I hadn't been walking alone. Not for a second. Then, the clearing again. The abandoned vehicle. Same as before, but the tracks leading away different. Wider, deeper, dragging marks as if something had pulled through the mud. I crouched, examining the impressions. Something massive, something alive. Tap, tap, paused. I froze. Silence enveloped me, but the air felt thick, charged. A sudden realization. The forest was rewriting itself. Tracks, mud, fog, trees, they weren't fixed. They changed with my perception, my movement, My fear. Tap, tap, it resumed. Shapes flickered in the periphery. I could see movement beneath the fog. Elongated forms crouched low, vanishing when caught directly. The rhythm had merged with mine. I swallowed, chest tight, and kept moving. Each step forward was both escape and descent. Tracks twisted, multiplied, vanished. The fog shifted. Shapes danced between the trees. Tap, tap, heartbeat and rhythm entwined. I realized the forest didn't just watch, it played, and I had just become its latest participant. A distant howl, sharp and deliberate, cut through the fog. Another answered. Tap, tap, rapid. Shapes rose from the mist, thin, long, crouching, observing. One figure lingered, tilting its head, almost curious. Then it retreated into fog. I realized with a sinking certainty I had survived the first layer, but the game had only begun. Tracks weren't just mud, they were invitation and trap, and I had no choice but to follow. I stepped forward carefully, flashlight low, eyes darting. Every track, every shadow, every rhythm was a test. Tap, tap, relentless. The forest, the mud, the fog. They breathed, watched, adjusted. I didn't know what waited at the end, or if the end even existed. Only movement, only rhythm, only shapes just beyond vision. I took a step forward, and the forest shifted under my eyes. Not figuratively. The same tree I had passed 10 minutes ago, or was an hour, loomed ahead again. Its bark glistened wet, branches arching low like claws. I blinked. The path I'd been following twisted impossibly, curling back on itself. My stomach churned. This wasn't disorientation from fatigue. Something was folding the forest around me. The mist hung heavy between pines, curling in slow eddies, swallowing the edges of the path. I called out once, my voice raw, swallowed instantly. Only silence answered. Tap, tap, my own heartbeat, I thought, until I realized the rhythm didn't match my pulse. It was slower, deliberate, echoing through the trunks. I turned, scanning the shadows between trees. Movement flickered there, pale, fluid, just beyond recognition. I froze. The shadow waited. Not hidden, not fleeing. It simply watched. Tap, tap, closer now. A leaf dropped somewhere behind me, not with the wind. Too precise. I ran. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly. Every step sank into spongy moss and wet needles. Branches tore at my jacket. Fog curled around my legs, thick and clinging. I glimpsed the path behind me. A perfect circle. The same tree with its twisted limbs, the same puddle reflecting dim sky. I'd never moved, or had I moved at all. I slowed, breathing hard, chest tight. My flashlight's beam flickered, shadows bending unnaturally. The silhouette appeared again, this time farther along the path, unmoving yet unmistakable. I squinted. It wasn't human. Too tall, thin limbs elongated, head tilting, observing, and then gone. Tap, tap, faint measured. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to run. But running made the forest shift faster, folding the trees around me, creating illusions that made no sense. One step forward, and the mud behind me was pristine. The path I thought I'd taken vanished. Footprints? Not mine. Wide, uneven, claw-like impressions pressed into earth that should have held only my boots. I stumbled over a root and landed hard. Fog curled at my face. I looked up another path, narrow, twisting, darker than the rest, lined by trees that leaned unnaturally close. Tap, tap, louder, closer. I swallowed fear and pressed forward, flashlight shaking. Each step echoed strangely, as if the forest mimicked my movement. Branches snapped above me. I jumped. Tap, tap, right there, but nothing. Leaves stirred. Shapes moved between trunks, flickering, dissolving. I want to call out again, but sound itself felt wrong. Swallowed before leaving my lips. Then I heard it, a whisper, low, sibilant, teasing. Not words, just sound. Tap, tap, synchronized now, almost mocking. I ran blindly down the twisted trail. The forest folded again. Paths repeated. Trees doubled in places they shouldn't exist. Fog thickened. I could feel eyes on me, though nothing moved in plain sight. Every instinct screamed to escape. But where? Behind me. Ahead, nowhere, everything blurred. Tap, tap, relentless, echoing from all directions. I stumbled into a clearing, a circle of broken pines. Branches jagged and snapping as if underweight. Mud churned under my boots. Wet. Sucking, the shadow appeared at the edge. Still unmoving, taller than any man, posture impossibly straight. My breath hitched. Tap, tap. Heartbeat aligned with mine for the first time. Only then I realized it had been matching me all along, waiting, timing me. I tried a different direction. The forest bent. Fog swirled unnaturally. Every path led back to the same spot. The clearing. The same puddle reflected dim sky. Shadows twisted around its edges. I glanced down. My reflection stared back, distorted, thin, elongated. Another reflection lingered beside it, head tilting. Tap, tap, faster now, closer. I backed away. Branches scraped my arms, catching on jacket. Mud clung to boots, thickening, pulling. I spun. Shadows flickered everywhere, tall, crouching, gliding just beyond perception. Tap, tap, not footsteps. Something else. Something below. I could feel pressure in the earth itself, moving, tracking. The forest was alive. Or worse, it was aware. I stumbled forward into a denser section. Trees pressed close, low branches snapping. Fog pressing tight. My flashlight revealed movement again. Shadows shifting, slipping behind trunks. Not fleeing, not attacking. Watching, learning. I stopped. Tap, tap. Mirror my own pulse exactly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I couldn't. I moved slowly now, each step deliberate. Fog swirled, revealing and hiding the same patches of ground over and over. One branch pointed downward. I looked. Footprints appeared, dragging marks deep in mud. They curved around me in impossible arcs. Not human, not consistent with anything I knew. Tap, tap, closer still. The rhythm gnawed at my chest. I reached another clearing, smaller this time. Puddles reflected shapes that shouldn't exist. I could see the shadow again, motionless at first, then bending forward, limbs stretching slightly toward me. I blinked. The figure snapped upright. Tap, tap, in sync. My heart raced. The fog whispered, curling around me, shaping paths that vanished as soon as I looked straight ahead. I tried to mark trees, scratch lines into bark, anything. Each mark vanished, fading as if it had never been there. Paths changed around me, folding and repeating. Tap, tap, relentless. I realized the shadow wasn't just observing. It was guiding, testing, waiting for me to break. A sudden stillness fell. Tap, tap, stop. Fog thickened, pressing at my chest, obscuring all shapes. Breathing felt impossible. Then movement. The shadow appeared again close, just beyond perception. Leaning, tilting, watching. No sound, only presence. My mind screamed, trying to make sense. The forest was no longer just confusing. It was hostile, aware, playful in a way meant to terrify. I forced myself to step forward. Fog shifted, creating impossible paths. Every step led to the same place, the clearing. Same puddle, same twisted branches. Reflection lingered beside mine, head tilting. Tap, tap, resumed, echoing, beating against my ribs. I realized then I wasn't lost. I was caught, not physically, mentally. The forest had me, bending perception, reshaping space to confuse, to control. I leaned against a tree, chest heaving. Mud clung to boots, branches scraped arms, fog pressed. Tap, tap, echoing from everywhere. I couldn't tell where I ended and the forest began. Every instinct screamed to fight, to flee, but there was no fleeing. Only movement, only rhythm, only watching. The shadow lingered, patient, silent, judging. I pressed forward again. Step, step, tap, tap, matching. The fog swirled differently now, forming corridors, loops, impossible arcs. Each path repeated the same clearing. I stopped at the puddle. Reflections shimmered unnaturally. One moved differently. Head tilted too far. Limbs too long. Tap, tap, heartbeat intertwined. I stepped back. Mud splashed. Shadow held its place. Waiting. Silent. I realized the forest wasn't just around me. It was inside me, shaping thought, perception, fear itself. Tap, tap, a rhythm I could not escape. Shapes moved in peripheral vision. One figure lingered, tall, thin, unblinking, then vanished. Puddles reflected emptiness again. The clearing seemed to breathe. I tried running, but every path returned me here. Tap, tap, relentless, perfect. The shadow reappeared, lingering just at the edge of fog. Watching, timing, testing. I had no answers. Only rhythm, only fog, only shapes twisting beyond recognition. I stopped, hard hammering, mud-sucking boots. Breathe slow, thought slow. Tap, tap, mirrored. I understood something. Escape wasn't out there. Not in paths, not in trees, not in fog. Tap, tap, it had always been inside. The shadow waited not to attack, but to teach, to trap perception, to fracture understanding. I glanced into the puddle again. Reflections shimmered. Shapes lingered at the edges. Just beyond clarity. Tap, tap, echoing from within and without. I took a step forward. Fog twisted. Trees leaned. Shadow paused. Waiting. Tap, tap, heartbeat aligned. I had no choice. Forward into the forest that was no longer just forest. Rain slammed against the windshield, hammering like fists that wouldn't stop. The wipers fought, but barely kept up. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the car, rattling every nerve. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes straining through sheets of water. That's when I heard it. Soft, irregular knocks, echoing faintly over the storm. Not thunder, not hail, something deliberate. At first, I thought it was a branch, maybe a loose sign slamming against a post. But the rhythm was wrong. Slow, methodical. 3 knocks, pause, 1, then 2. I glanced at my partner. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. The storm masked it just enough to make me doubt myself. We turned onto a gravel road, mud thick under the tires. Rain plastered our jackets, dripping into gloves, soaking hair. Lightning lit the fields. Empty, rolling, but shadows moved oddly. I swore I saw a figure at the edge, crouching, then gone when I blinked. My stomach sank. I told myself it was nothing. Wind, water, imagination. Another knock, closer this time. The sound seemed to come from multiple directions, bouncing off the trees, the hills, the empty barns we passed. My heart picked up, trying to keep pace with the storm. I slowed the car, squinting through the rain. Nothing. Then tap, 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 right on the roof. I jumped. My partner froze, staring at me. Did you hear that? I whispered. He shook his head. Just the storm. I wanted to believe him, but my gut screamed otherwise. I scanned the horizon. Dark shapes stretched in the rain, twisted and low, fleeting like smoke. Something was out there, something moving with the storm, or maybe waiting. The road narrowed, flanked by dense trees, their trunks slick and dark. Lightning revealed glimpses, branches reaching, almost like fingers, shadows stretching in unnatural ways. I caught a flash in the corner of my eye, a figure leaning against a tree, thin, hunched, watching. I blinked. Gone. My chest tightened. Knocks again. Behind us now, echoing in the mud and rain. Impossible. No one was behind us. We were alone, or at least we should have been. My partner shifted nervously, eyes darting. I gripped the wheel tighter, flashlight in one hand, scanning between lightning flashes. Every shadow seemed to twitch, bend, whisper movement that wasn't there. We passed an old farmhouse, boarded windows, peeling paint, sitting still against the rain. Lightning revealed its front porch. Someone standing there? Thin silhouette, head tilted, unmoving, then gone. Just a trick of light. I told myself, heartbeat racing anyway, but the knocks continued, faint, unpredictable, never stopping. I slowed to a crawl. Mud splashed up against tires, slick and sticky. The road curved sharply, cutting through trees that leaned close as if listening. Another knock, this time on the car door. I spun around. Empty. Nothing. Rain poured down in sheets. Thunder rolled. My mind screamed to run, but curiosity, dread, some mix of both, held me in place. A flash of lightning revealed the field to our left. Something shifted, something low, moving just under the tall grass. Tap, tap, a repeated rhythm that didn't match rain. I swallowed hard. Did you see that? My partner shook his head, staring forward, refusing. I swallowed fear and slowed more. Every instinct screamed. Danger, maybe, yes, but of what? The road twisted again. Trees pressed closer. Shadows pooled in hollows where moonlight didn't reach. I caught glimpses of shapes at the edges of vision. Human? Animal? Too thin, too long, bending like smoke. Knock, knock, knock. A beat, then a single tap. Always near, never fully visible. Lightning struck a tree close by. Branches snapped, rain hissed, and then silence. The storm paused just for a heartbeat. Knock, tap, echoing behind us, soft but distinct. My stomach dropped. The air itself felt heavier. Something had followed, or had been here all along, waiting in rhythm with the storm. I forced the car forward. The mud splashed, wheels sliding. Trees leaned, fog curling at ground level. Shapes moved in it, fleeting. Knock, knock, tap. I couldn't locate the source. Every shadow whispered. Every reflection hinted at presence. I glanced at the side mirror. Empty, yet I felt watched, a weight pressing from the dark. The forest thinned for a moment. Fields opening up, rain lashing across low hills. I exhaled, briefly relieved. Tap, knock, echoing from the trees behind. Impossibly close, impossibly far. I swallowed. Fear drummed in my veins. My partner gripped his door handle, eyes wide. I glanced at him. He saw it too now. Movement, fleeting at the corner of his eye. Something watching, always. Lightning revealed an old barn, crooked and open at one side. Shadows twisted inside. Tap, knock, the rhythm changed faster, teasing. My hands shook. I told myself to stay calm, to rationalize. But reason slipped as shapes moved too quickly. Trees bending, mud rising where it shouldn't. The storm was hiding it, showing glimpses, testing me. We passed the barn. Rain blurred everything. A knock, sharp, right on the hood. I flinched, looked around, nothing. Then another, softer, from the side. I caught movement, low and fast. Something slipping between the trees, gone before I could focus. Fear rose. Tap, knock, echoing from all directions now. I realized the storm didn't hide it. It was part of it, enhancing it, revealing pieces, concealing others. The road curved again. Mud churned deep and slick. I slowed, scanning. Fog thickened in patches. Shapes flickered. Tap, knock, almost like footsteps, but wrong. Uneven, not human, not any animal I knew. I glanced at the fields. Empty, yet something moved, just beyond clarity, waiting for me to notice. Lightning lit a figure briefly, standing among trees. Thin, hunched, limbs too long, head tilted unnaturally. I blinked, gone. Tap, knock, right on the roof again. My partner jumped. I swallowed dry, chest tight, mind racing. We couldn't stop, couldn't see, couldn't make sense of rhythm or source. Only presence, watching, testing. I pressed the accelerator, tires spinning through mud. Trees curved, shadows flickered, fog rolled unnaturally. Knock, tap, echoing, taunting. The forest, or whatever it was, shifted subtly around the storm. Shapes bent in corners of vision. Puddles reflected more than sky. Reflections that weren't ours. We passed a hollowed oak, twisted, black against rain. A knock, deliberate, close. I looked up. Branches moved as if brushed by fingers, thin and skeletal. Tap, knock, rhythmic. Following, anticipating. I realized with a chill, it didn't need to show itself. The storm, the mud, the dark, the forest. Everything carried it. Everything whispered it. I tried to keep focus, keep moving, keep the car straight. But fear seeped, slow, heavy, into every muscle. Tap, knock, from left, right, behind. Lightning revealed impossible angles. Reflections shimmered in puddles. Shapes twisted and vanished. My pulse raced. Breathing heavy, heart hammering. I knew. We weren't alone. Never had been. The storm hit it, but it had been there all along, moving with the rain, shaping perception. The road straightened briefly. I exhaled, thinking maybe, just maybe, we'd clear the worst. Tap, knock, echoed once more faint behind us. I looked in the rear view. Nothing, just rain, mud, shadows. But I felt the weight, watching, always, waiting. We passed the last bend before open fields. I blinked for a heartbeat, relief. Then mud splashed strangely at the edges. Footprints that hadn't been there, wide, uneven, clawed. Tap, knock, faded into the distance, or maybe just masked by rain. I didn't dare look back. I gripped the wheel, soaked, exhausted, heartbeat still racing. The storm raged. Knocks had stopped, for now. But I knew, deep down, the rhythm was still there, just out of sight, waiting for the next moment, the next stretch of road, the next bend, watching. The rain had stopped, but the air still hung thick and wet. Puddles reflected the dim glow of the streetlights, their orange light flickering like dying embers. I drove slowly, tires crunching over wet asphalt. The patrol car a single heartbeat in a city that seemed almost abandoned, but something didn't fit. Streetlights flickered ahead, 1, 2, 3, in a sequence too deliberate to be random. Each flash revealed shapes, shadows at the edge of the road. Faces? Limbs? My eyes strained, blinking against the glare. Each flicker lasted barely a heartbeat, but it was enough for me to see movement, something skittering just out of reach. I tried to rationalize it. Shadows cast by trash, a stray animal, my mind still echoing with the storm. But the rhythm of the lights, the cadence of the flicker, felt intentional. Tap, pause, flicker movement, always on the periphery, watching, waiting. I slowed the car further, scanning every puddle. Lightning from earlier storms had left shallow pools, and each reflection, shapes shimmered that weren't ours. Faces, distorted, twisted, moving beneath the surface of water. I blinked. They were gone, but the impression lingered, a pressure behind my eyes. A streetlight ahead flickered and stayed dark. The darkness felt thick, almost tactile, like stepping into a different world. I gripped the wheel tighter. Tap, knock. Echoing somewhere under the car? Impossible. I told myself it was a pavement, shifting, the tires pushing through wet patches. But the feeling remained. We weren't alone. Another light blinked on. A fleeting figure appeared, tall, thin, limbs long, head tilted unnaturally, gone in a flash. I swerved slightly, heart hammering, eyes scanning the edge of the road. My partner leaned forward, gripping the dashboard, whispering, "Did you see that?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "It's not real," I told myself. But it was. I felt it, a presence riding the sequence of lights. The sequence accelerated. Blink, 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 revealing shadows dancing closer, closer to the road. Trees leaned unnaturally, their branches slicing the fog that had rolled in from the outskirts. Shapes moved between them, barely visible. Tap, tap, a rhythm I couldn't locate. My chest tightened. Fear pressed against my ribs like wet cloth. We passed a deserted intersection. The light flickered 3 times. Each flash revealed a different figure standing at the edge, hunched, thin, featureless in the gloom. Blink, gone. My stomach churned. Someone was orchestrating the lights, showing glimpses, hiding the rest, testing me. I tried to focus on the road. Every shadow seemed alive. Puddles reflected not just the light, but movement that didn't match anything nearby. Shapes bent, twisted, flowing in ways impossible. Tap, knock, echoing in time with the flicker. My partner shook his head. "You're seeing things." I wanted to agree, wanted the relief of rational thought, but I couldn't. I knew better. A light ahead stayed on longer, revealing the edge of the road. A hollow, a ditch, and something crouched inside. Low, thin, glinting eyes, too fast, gone before I could blink. I swallowed. My hand shook on the wheel. Tap, knock from the side. Fleeting. Not human. Not any animal I knew. The road curved sharply. Streetlights flickered in sequence again. Blink, shadow gone. Blink, shadow, closer. Blink. something reaching toward the road. My pulse spiked. I gripped the wheel tighter, scanning puddles for reflections. Faces appeared, twisted and silent, in the water. I swallowed, heart hammering. Tap, knock, echoing across asphalt, in rhythm with the flicker. My partner leaned forward, whispering, "Do you feel that?" I nodded, words lost in the press of fear. The lights flashed again, revealing shapes moving behind trees, along the edges of buildings. Impossible angles, limbs bending, faces twisting, reflections that didn't match reality. I realized with a cold squeeze of dread, the flicker wasn't random. It was showing us what it wanted, hiding the rest. A streetlight ahead blew out entirely, plunging the road into darkness. The air thickened, heavy and wet. Tap, knock, from nowhere and everywhere at once. I froze, eyes wide. The darkness seemed to pulse, edges of the world stretching, bending. Shapes flickered at the corners of vision. Too quick, too deliberate. Blink, flicker, gone. I tried to keep moving, tires sliding over wet asphalt. Every puddle reflected shapes I didn't recognize. Faces turned toward us with eyes too dark, too deep. Tap, knock, echoing in rhythm with a sequence of streetlights. Sometimes behind, sometimes to the side, always just out of focus. My partner whispered, voice trembling, "It's following us." I swallowed hard, nodding. I knew he was right. Another light flickered on. A figure appeared, closer this time. Thin, hunched, its head twisting unnaturally. Blink, gone. Tap, knock, echoed from multiple directions. I realized the lights were guiding it, giving it form, letting it play. We were the prey, and the rhythm was its hunting ground. We passed a series of mechanical satellites. Windows reflected shapes that weren't ours. Faces twisted in water puddles, in glass. Limbs stretched unnaturally. Tap, knock, echoing in time with each flicker. I swallowed, trying to stay rational. My partner gripped the dash, silent, eyes wide. I could see it in him. The slow burn of fear that refuses to be rationalized. A light ahead stayed on, revealing a figure in the middle of the road. Too thin, too tall, head tilted unnaturally. It stepped aside, just enough for us to pass. Blink, gone. Tap, knock came from behind. I realized the sequence of lights was a lure, revealing and concealing, orchestrating a path through its domain. The road straightened. Lights flickered in a rapid sequence. Blink, blink, blink. Each revealing more shapes, moving faster now. Shapes reaching, bending in impossible angles. Tap, knock, echoed everywhere, disorienting. I gripped the wheel with white-knuckled hands. Heart pounding, adrenaline burning. My mind screamed to look away, but curiosity, dread curiosity, kept my eyes on the edges. Another puddle reflected a cluster of faces, layered one over another, eyes hollow, mouths moving without sound. Tap, knock from the side. I flinched. Shapes skittered between shadows, then disappeared. My partner whispered, "We can't stop." I nodded, voice lost. The flickering lights dictated everything. They revealed, they hid, they hunted. A streetlight flickered violently. Lightning flashed briefly in the distance, illuminating more shapes, stretching them across walls, road, and puddles. Tap, knock, echoing. They weren't fully there, not real in the conventional sense, but the sequence made them exist momentarily, intentionally. I swallowed hard. The fear was no longer just outside. It was inside, pulsing with the rhythm of the flicker. We passed a narrow alley. Lights blinked rapidly, 1, 2, 3, each revealing a figure closer, limbs bending unnaturally, faces distorted. Blink, gone. Tap, knock, right on the car door. I flinched, spinning the wheel. The shadows bent and twisted, and I realized the flicker was not a light problem. It was a signal, a guide, and we were being guided straight into its design. The road curved again. A light flickered off. Darkness enveloped us. Tap, knock, echoing everywhere. Puddles reflected more shapes. Faces and limbs bending impossibly. Blink. A figure stood at the roadside, tall, thin, unmoving. Blink, gone. Tap, knock, continued, as if marking our progress, taunting, orchestrating. We reached the outskirts of the city. Streetlights stabilized. Shapes faded. Tap, knock, receded. But the memory lingered, echoing with each blink in the rearview mirror. I swallowed, chest tight. My partner exhaled, voice shaky. We made it? I nodded, not trusting the relief. Somewhere, just beyond sight, the rhythm waited, patient, deliberate, unfinished. Even now, I can feel it. The flicker isn't gone. It follows, hidden in the edges of vision, in reflections in rhythm, waiting for the next sequence, the next blink, the next shallow puddle. Watching, testing, always waiting. The hum started before I even realized it. Low, almost imperceptible at first, vibrating through the seat beneath me. Tires crunching on wet gravel, headlights slicing through fog. But the sound was under everything, beneath the engine, beneath the rain's echo. A pulse I couldn't ignore. I glanced at my partner. He was silent, eyes narrowing, ears twitching. "Do you hear that?" I asked. He shook his head, just a flicker of unease on his face. But I couldn't shake it. The vibration in the seat, the low thrum in the air. It followed us, staying just behind the patrol car. Impossible to pinpoint. I tried to reason it out. Power lines? Underground cables? Something mechanical? But the more we drove, the clearer it became. The sound wasn't tied to the environment. It moved with us, step for step, following, humming low, like a presence just out of sight. I slowed the car. The hum intensified. It grew louder in the cabin, shaking the glass of the windows. My partner frowned. "It's weird," he said, but no words could capture the pressure building in my chest. Something unseen was there, humming, aware of us. Every turn we made, every stretch of road, it matched, as if it knew where we would go next. I tried to face it, rolled down the window, hear the source, but the second I leaned forward, it vanished, just like that. Silence. The empty road stretched before us, fog rolling between the trees. But I could feel it lingering, waiting as if amused by my movement. We reached a deserted farmhouse. The hum returned before we even reached the gate. Louder now, throbbing through the tires, through the metal of the car. I braked instinctively, eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing moved. Nothing, except the fog curling around the porch, thickening unnaturally, and the sound relentless. My partner tried to lighten it, probably just the wind. But I knew better. Wind didn't hide when approached. Wind didn't play. This hum had intent. I could feel it in my bones, and the tension coiling along my spine. I swallowed hard. Something was out there, just beyond sight, observing, waiting for us to move wrong. I moved the car forward slowly, watching for shadows. The hum vanished as soon as we advanced, only to return stronger a few yards ahead. I slammed my hands on the wheel, heart hammering. The pattern was deliberate. Step forward, it disappears. Step forward again, it grows louder, surrounding us. Invisible but tangible. Fog pressing closer. Puddles reflected no movement. Only the car and trees bending in the haze. And still the hum, low, vibrating, like a living thing beneath the asphalt. I realized with chill that it wasn't coming from the ground. It wasn't coming from the air. It was everywhere, surrounding, filling the world with its rhythm. We drove past a line of power poles. Blink, a shadow moved between them, long and thin. The hum thickened, vibrating through the car floor. I tried to focus on the road, but the rhythm of it, it was invasive, creeping into thought, pulling at attention. I could feel my vision narrowing, senses tightening. Something was here, but it wasn't human, and it wasn't supposed to be. I tried to call it out. "Who's there?" The words barely left my throat. Silence. Only the hum responded, rising, swarming in the air, vibrating to the metal of the car. My partner's hand gripped my shoulder. It's like it knows us," he whispered. I swallowed, nodding, unable to disagree. That was the worst part. It wasn't just following, it was aware. We reached a narrow bridge, slick with rain. The hum climbed in pitch, low notes turning to a vibration that seemed to pulse against the ribs. I slowed the car, scanning the sides. Trees bent unnaturally, fog rolling thicker, obscuring everything beyond 5 feet. And still, the sound followed, everywhere, nowhere. I leaned closer to the window. The moment I tried to locate it, the hum vanished. Nothing, just a drizzle on the windshield, the fog curling, and the empty road ahead. My chest heaved. Relief? Maybe, but only for a second. The moment I moved forward, the sound returned, louder, omnipresent, like it was right in the car, pulsing to the metal, through the air, through me. We turned onto a side road, narrower, lined with trees that leaned inward. Shadows bent oddly, impossible angles. The hum roared in the cabin now, vibrating through the seats, the dash, even the steering wheel. My hand shook on the wheel. Keep your eyes on the road, I muttered, but it wasn't about the road. It was about perception. The hum made the world shift, made reality bend. Every puddle, every shadow, every line of wet asphalt seemed alive. The road narrowed further, curving into a dip. I could feel it now, more than hear it. A presence crawling along the sides, weaving around the car, shaping the fog with its rhythm. Tap, a faint knock from nowhere. Not a sound I could trace. Just pressure, awareness, watching, waiting. We slowed to a crawl. Every movement, every glance made it vanish, only to return moments later, louder, filling the cabin. It felt like something ancient, intelligent, patient. Not malevolent, not yet, but curious. The kind of curiosity that doesn't forgive mistakes. A tree bent over the road, shadows stretching unnaturally. The hum vibrated against my teeth. Puddles reflected shapes again, elongated, fluid, distorted. Limbs that weren't human, faces that weren't human. Blink, gone, but the vibration remained, coiling to the car like smoke. We reached a clearing. The hum softened for a moment, almost gentle, almost inviting. I could feel my pulse slowing, heart settling in rhythm with it. My partner exhaled shakily. It's calming, he said, but I didn't trust it. Calm like a predator circling prey. I kept my eyes on the edges, on the fog, on the reflections that never match reality. I pressed forward. The hum disappeared. Silence. Relief? Maybe. But my senses screamed it was only a lull. Step too far, a blink too long, and it would return. Stronger, closer, waiting for us to slip. Another puddle reflected movement. Something crouched thin, impossibly still. Blink. Gone. Tap. Knock. Faint from the air itself. The hum began again, subtle, omnipresent. A rhythm that was not random, pulsing with a logic I couldn't decipher. I realized then, the hum wasn't sound. It was signal. It was presence. And we were its focus. The road curved into darkness, fog pressing tighter. We drove on, slow, careful. The hum followed, disappearing when approached, returning when ignored. It was a game, and we were players who hadn't learned the rules yet. I felt it then, deep in my chest, a vibration that wasn't ours, pulsing in time with the world around us. Step, blink, vanish, return. The hum existed outside reality, but imposed itself upon it, shaping perception, bending the edges of what we knew. The road opened again into a straight stretch. Streetlights blinked in the distance. The hum receded, just enough for us to breathe. Relief, a heartbeat, a moment to think. But I knew better. It was patient, intelligent, waiting for the next curve, the next puddle, the next lapse in attention. Even now, the memory of it pulses beneath my skin. Not sound, not quite, but awareness. Something follows, always in rhythm, in patience, waiting for the next approach, the next blink, the next lapse in certainty. The hum doesn't leave. It never leaves. I first noticed it in the rearview mirror. At first, just a flicker, pale against the darkness behind the car. A shape standing still, watching. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the headlights. Fog curling through the trees. But when I glanced again, it was there, tall, thin, featureless, pale, eyes locked on me. Though I couldn't see them clearly, I jerked the wheel slightly. You seeing this? My partner barely looked up from the road. What? I pointed, but the moment he turned to glance, nothing was there, just the empty stretch of asphalt, mist curling along the edges like smoke. My stomach twisted. It shouldn't be gone that fast. It shouldn't be able to vanish. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. The mind plays tricks at night. Fog pressing against headlights. Shadows moving in rhythm with the car. But my pulse told me otherwise. Something followed us, waiting, testing us. And when I looked away, it seemed to advance, creeping close in the mirror, but never appearing in the road ahead. Every few seconds, I caught it again. Rear view eyes, white, immovable, patient. It never blinked, never shifted, yet it wasn't static. When I stared directly, it would vanish, melting into the darkness. But the instant I focused forward, a glance back would reveal it again. Always watching, always there, just beyond reality's reach. I tried to speed up. Rain slicked the asphalt, wipers slicing through sheets of water, headlights bouncing off puddles. But the mirror never lied. There was faint and ghostly, growing more distinct as we drove. My partner tightened his grip on the console. "It's just a reflection," he muttered, but his voice carried doubt. He knew, even if he wouldn't say it. I gritted my teeth, refusing to look for too long, afraid that acknowledging it would make it solid, tangible, impossible to ignore. Yet curiosity gnawed at me, twisting my stomach. What was it? A person? A ghost? Something else, watching us in the shadows of the road behind, feeding off our attention. The trees leaned in closer now, dark fingers curling over the headlights. Shadows elongated unnaturally. The rear view eyes appeared more often, sometimes two flashes where one should be. Each time they grew sharper, paler, their gaze somehow pressing against my skull, invading my thoughts. I shook my head, trying to clear it, breathe, drive, focus. The road curved sharply. I braked. Water sprayed from the tires. My partner whispered something I didn't catch over the hum of rain. The squeak of wipers, the low buzz of my own heartbeat. Another glance in the mirror, and it was closer, taller, thinner, looming behind the car as if the darkness itself had formed into it. And yet, one direct stare and gone. I felt a chill creep along my spine. The kind of cold that isn't just temperature, that crawls into the marrow. Something about the way it moved, or didn't, made the air around the car heavy, thick with a pressure I couldn't name. The fog clung to mirrors, curling over the edges, hiding the road behind, giving it space to appear, vanish, appear again. I tried to focus on the road, the lines slick with rain, but every time I blinked, the rear view eyes returned. Each time, just for a second, enough to feel the weight of them, watching, waiting, patient. I wondered if it would ever step into the light, or if that was impossible, if it thrived only in observation, in reflection. My partner's voice cut through my thoughts. "Turn on the high beams," he said. His hand shook slightly. I did. The road ahead shone bright, washed in stark white, but the rear view eyes did not fade. They became clearer, sharper, almost human. Not quite, pale, elongated, like the mist itself had taken form. Still, the moment I looked directly in the mirror, they vanished. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. Each disappearance felt deliberate, taunting. Step forward, vanish, blink, return. The pattern was patient, but precise, like it was learning me, learning how I saw, how I moved, where I focused, a presence that adapted to attention itself. We passed an old, abandoned gas station. Flickering neon sign buzzed faintly. I glanced in the mirror as we drove by. For a moment, the figure lingered by the pumps, pale and still, staring. Then, the instant I looked directly, it collapsed into the fog, dissolved like mist in sunlight. But the memory remained, a pulse of unease hammering in my chest. I tried to talk, to break the tension. Maybe it's some guy messing with us. Lights, fog, reflection. My voice sounded weak to me, hollow, swallowed by the storm outside. I didn't believe it. My gut told me this wasn't human. Human would leave. Human would step into the light. Human couldn't vanish at will like that. The road narrowed again. Trees leaned over, branches snapping under the wind and rain. The rear view eyes appeared with each blink, closer now, as if stepping forward in the reflection. I clenched the wheel, breath shallow. The car felt heavier, as if the air around it had mass. The fog seemed thicker behind, pressing forward, nudging the darkness to follow. I dared to glance at my partner. His face was pale, tense. It's always there, isn't it?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. The silence between us was thick, a shared understanding of something impossible watching, probing, existing where it shouldn't. I slowed further. The rain pelted the windshield in sheets. The hum of tires on wet asphalt faded into background in my mind as the mirror's reflection consumed focus. The eyes lingered longer now, staying after a blink, leaving a memory of their shape in the mind. I realized the fear wasn't just from seeing them. It was from knowing they would be back, again and again, a repetition impossible to escape, a sudden curve in the road. My vision caught movement in the peripheral. The rear view eyes appeared again, paler, taller, impossibly still. I froze for a heartbeat, then forced my gaze forward. When I dared to glance back, the figure vanished, but the fog rippled unnaturally where it had stood. Something had shifted, left a space behind, as if bending reality itself in its absence. I felt nausea twist my stomach. The storm outside seemed less threatening than what followed us in reflection. Each blink, each turn of the wheel, each cautious glance brought it back. Watching, patient, curious, calculating. I had to keep moving, had to escape the road behind, even if it meant racing into the storm ahead. The hum of the tires, the steady rhythm of rain. It became background to the presence behind us. I noticed puddles along the side of the road, reflecting something extra, not in the mirror itself. Shadows that flickered independently, elongated, moving with a logic that made no sense. The rear view eyes weren't just eyes. They were awareness, leaving impressions in the world itself. We reached a straight stretch. The mirror seemed empty for a second. Relief washed over me briefly, but instinct told me it was only gone from immediate view. Step forward, blink, and there it would be again, in another frame, another reflection, another stretch of darkness. Waiting, always waiting. I tried to speak, but words caught in my throat. Each time I turned my head, each glance backward, it taunted, vanished, then returned, always just beyond direct sight. I realized the terror wasn't in its form. It wasn't in its pale, unnatural shape. The terror was in the rules it imposed. Rules we couldn't understand, rules that bent perception itself. A curve loomed ahead, fog thickening, water pooling in ruts along the asphalt. I slowed, gripped the wheel tighter. My partner's breathing was shallow beside me. And then, for the briefest moment, I dared to glance at the rear view. It wasn't there. The absence was worse. Empty mirror, but a space felt occupied. The chill crawling up my spine whispered that it had stepped beyond reflection, into some place I couldn't see, waiting for the next blink, the next glance, the next moment of attention to return. I pressed forward, heart hammering, vision locked ahead. The storm screamed around us, lightning fracturing the sky, rain slamming the car roof. But all I could see, all I could feel, was the emptiness in the rearview mirror, and the knowledge that it had not gone. Not yet. And when I finally dared to look again, step, blink, vanish, it would be waiting, watching, always watching.